There we go. So hello everyone, and welcome to the University of Oslo and the Department of Musicology. It's a great pleasure to open this important and very timely event, the very first Women Musicians Wellbeing Workshop, initiated and organized by our postdoctoral researcher, Sara Damario. This workshop brings together researchers, musicians and professionals from diverse fields to explore the well-being of women in music. It is a pioneering effort, not only in its interdisciplinary scope, but also in its courage to address topics that are often overlooked and even resisted in academic and artistic contexts. The workshop today opens up new areas of research and insight into how gender, health and artistic practice intersect. It challenges us to think critically about the structures and the cultures that shape the lives and careers of women musicians, and to imagine better ones. In a time when diversity and equality are in some places being questioned, restricted, and even dismantled, it's even more important than ever to create open and supportive arenas for this kind of research. This workshop is such one arena. And I'm proud that our department and Ritmo can host and support it. So thank you to everyone who made this possible, especially to Sara Damario for her initiative and dedication, but also to another key person, which is Alexander Refsund Jensenius, head of Ritmo Center of Disciplinary Studies in Rhythm, Time and Motion. So Alexander, welcome, and I wish you all a very meaningful and inspiring day here. Thank you.
Thank you, Anja. Very nice to see people here in the hall. I know there's also quite a lot of people following online, so welcome also to you. I will just say a very few words about Ritmo, which is a Norwegian Center of Excellence, working on the intersection between musicology, psychology and technology, so it's kind of a triangle there. And here at the University of Oslo we have around 60 researchers working within our center, and we are working from the softest soft to the hardest hard, you can say, methodologically speaking. Reading and writing books, doing different types of music performance and analysis, doing different types of measurements of the body and the mind, and also doing lots of machine learning. And over the years we have developed a concept first called Music Lab, where we wanted to go out of the lab and explore what's going on in real musical contexts and concerts. So we have been organizing what we call research concerts, where we try to take some of the equipment and the methods that we're using in lab settings and use them in the real world for concerts. Now, as we've been scaling up, we've been going from looking at individual musicians to duos and trios, quartets, and then suddenly, with a boom, then thanks to Stavanger Symphony Orchestra, that's also sitting here in the hall today, we decided to scale up to symphony orchestra, which is a big gap when you're doing this. So we did the first concert together with Stavanger some years back, and we have continued that collaboration. Then also we had a collaboration with the Norwegian Radio Orchestra, Cork. It's also representative here in the hall today, where we did another project with them, trying to study and figure out what's happening in an orchestra setting on stage, and also looking at rehearsals and kind of what's going on here and going in. And people ask me, what type of questions do you have? And there's not one question. We typically have between 10 and 20 researchers working on these projects with many different questions. And then now, as we start working on it, then we start also see there are some topics emerging that are important and that we need to figure out. And one of the topics that we didn't start from, but that has emerged through all of this, is physical and mental well-being, health and well-being. and particularly for women musicians. So you could say this workshop today is really kind of the one of the results that have come out of the explorations we have done over the last years with orchestras, but also with other musicians. And it feels like this is so important that we just cannot let it go. We just need to work more on this. And that's why we're here today, because now we are trying to dig in and try to understand more about what's going on here and try to figure out, okay, what's the directions here for the future. So that's why we call it a workshop. It's a real workshop in the sense that we don't have so many answers for you, or perhaps some of our guests have answers, but at least from our perspective, we also want to learn, and we want to see how can we shape this important topic as we move forward. So with that, I would say welcome to also Ritmo and the Department of Musicology, and hand it over to Sara Damario, who will introduce the workshop and the program. Thank you.
Welcome to the workshop on women musicians' well-being. We welcome all of you on site, but also all of you on YouTube. This workshop aims to bring together academics, but also professional musicians. And the idea is to explore the factors that enhance but also that hinders well-being. Together we will examine the unique challenges women face in their professional journeys, but also discuss the strategies that support and that can improve their well-being in their professional career. Today we will hear about the latest research on well-being from scholars and engage in a lively discussions with both scholars and professional players. The first keynote speaker is Aaron Williamson. He is Professor of Performance Science at the Royal College of Music in London, where he directs the Centre for Performance Science, a partnership between the Royal College of Music and Imperial College London. His research focuses on the skill performance and applied scientific initiative that inform music learning and teaching, as well as the impact of music and the arts on society. The title of his talk is Musical Impact, Exploring Interdisciplinary Approaches to Informing Musicians' Training, Health, and Well-being. Please join me in welcoming Professor Aaron Williamson.
Can I just check that the microphone is working? Yes, great. So I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for that warm welcome, and hello to everyone who's online as well. So I'm coming from the Royal College of Music, which is based in London, which is in a small island just to the west of this superbly fantastic performing economic block. And looking in, I'm in the southeast corner of that small island. So this will be relevant later on, but the neighborhood in which we're based is South Kensington. So the tube station, if you were to arrive at South Kensington Station, you end up here, and then you would find as the backbone to the neighborhood Exhibition Road. And at the heart of this neighborhood is, of course, the Royal College of Music, and we have surrounding us pretty much on all sides Imperial College, but we have national centers of expert practice. So we have the Victoria and Albert Museum, which is the National Museum for Art and Design, the Natural History Museum, the Science Museum, the Royal Geographical Society, the Royal Albert Hall, which we look directly onto from our doorstep, and the Royal College of Art. So if you were looking from the Albert Hall to the Royal College of Music, this is what you would see. We were established in the 1880s. We have 900 students who are looked after by 300 members of staff who are currently working as professional musicians across the world. And those students are coming from over 60 countries, so it's quite an international cohort. And this year, this very academic year, we're celebrating 25 years of performance science at the Royal College of Music. So we'll be putting on a number of events throughout the year, and if you'd like to know more, if you'd like to come, then I can definitely let you know by email. So we define performance science as the systematic study of how, what, when, where, and why people perform, as well as who performs and the consequences that performances hold. Within the Royal College of Music, we have a relatively small team of just 6 permanent members of staff, who you see here. In addition to that, we have a PhD cohort of around currently 22 students. We run an MSc in performance science, which has 25 students. On the undergraduate program, we teach across a number of different areas. So every single first-year student who comes to us will have a compulsory course on healthy musician. Then in year 2, they have another compulsory course called Professional Musician, where we're talking about things around entrepreneurship, getting your CV done, getting your taxes prepared, all the things that people need to know to function professionally. And then by years 2 to 4, then we offer a number of optional modules where students could opt into, including psychology of performance, how to memorize music for performance, and the role of music in healthcare settings. We run a number of modules with other departments on music and emotion, musicians in the digital age, enterprise and innovation, and so on. So every year we see around 300 undergraduate students through our department and the courses that we run. But we're not just based within the Royal College of Music, so we are in this neighborhood with expert practice. So in 2015, we formally partnered with Imperial College to create an interdisciplinary Center for Performance Science. And we work with a number of leading Imperial scientists who bring their expertise to the table, whether that's from electrical engineering, bioengineering, the business school, biomechanics, and so on and so forth. So the way that we work, basically, is to use methods drawn from a number of different approaches for individual projects. Let's say we have a project that is represented by yellow dots, or another project by blue dots. We may draw in theories and methods from those fields, and ideally what we're aiming to do is to draw applications from that work, not only within the music context, which we do at the Royal College of Music, but also for performance in business, in education, medicine, science, and sport. But in addition to working on a project level, we also have some so-called grand challenges in performance science. The first of these, which we set up when the center was founded, was performers' health and well-being. Because we know that there are several problems that we have to address, and we want to use systematic research to help our students tackle those problems and to build successful and sustainable careers. We're also interested, by the way, in the role of music and the arts in society for enhancing public health and individual health. We do work in a field which we call capturing performance, where we try to advance the methods by which performance is studied. And because so many of our performers are learning out in the field, they're actually we have a grand challenge on experiential learning. So we look at that. I mean, I would like to think that they learn something from the lectures that I give, but I know that they learn most of their things from the lessons in which they're actually playing their instruments and singing. So that gives us a chance to look at performance across a number of different fields and draw those useful parallels and those applications. So if you're interested more in the center, then have a look at performancescience.ac.uk, and you'll get access to our publications and other details around that. I'm going to talk, and it looks, 4 bullet points as part of our overview. It's going to be compact, and I'll roll through these pretty quickly. But I just want to provide a general outline for how we could be better within music education and within supporting professional musicians. I want to outline and make a case for the need for doing better to support health and well-being. I'll provide some results from a project that we ran a few years ago called Musical Impact, One of the outcomes of that project was a network called Healthy Conservatoire, so I'll introduce that. And then I'll finish by providing some information, or some ideas where I think we need to keep progressing and developing new thinking. So let's just for a moment look at, when we think about expert performance, we think about intensive practice, we think about hard work, of course. This is a standard graph taken from Erickson's classic article published in 1993 about 10,000 hours of practice. And you see, of course, you know, those pianists who he surveyed at that time, you know, even the expert pianists who are represented by the dark dots and the amateurs by the light dots, there were differences in the quantity of practice even as early as age 6. And by the time these people got into 20 years old, there were huge gulfs in the differences between how much time those musicians had clocked in terms of, in the practice room, in terms of developing their skills. Okay, but I think this sort of thing can lead to some sloppy thinking. And I'd like to point out 3 ways in which it might. Firstly, if you just look at these results, what you might conclude is that all you have to do is to clock in those hours. And that's never the case. You've got to clock in the right hours and to learn effectively and efficiently. So just putting in your time card is not going to get you to the expert level. The second problem that you might find, or second problematic conclusion that you might reach, is that it looks from this graph that the only thing that's going to get you to the top is practice. But yet we know that there are interpersonal qualities about you, the musician. There are also environmental catalysts that can help you along the way, or they might actually get in your way. And then the third problem is that it looks as though once you get on the practicing train and you're going towards that destination, it's pretty smooth sailing. But we know that it's not at all like that. Why is it not like that? Well, because we see with surveys across the field that there's debilitating anxiety reported by a startlingly high number of performing musicians. In any other field, this would be seen as a problem that must be resolved, but yet we seem to be able just to live with it. It's not just about the mental strain, but we also have the physical strain. Depending on which studies you read, professional musicians may report performance-related pain. Around 60 to 75% of professional musicians at any given time would report that, or in students, the numbers tend to be a bit higher. Now, if you compare that with a field that's a little bit different from music, like a contact sport, then the numbers in terms of reporting pain, performance-related pain, tend to be pretty comparable with what musicians experience. And this is interesting, given that this is meant to be directly hitting someone and not here, okay? But then you may say, well, maybe musicians just complain a lot. Well, maybe we do, but we often have to complain about certain issues where you find students sometimes engaging with over-practicing to the extent to which they may do physical harm. And then worryingly, you ask the question, you know, after a competition, the student comes back and maybe with this sort of problem and say, well, what would you have done differently? And the answer is often, well, I don't know. Okay. So this was the problem identified about 10 years ago by Conservatoires UK. We ran a series of town hall meetings where we wanted to collaborate on some research, and we all identified that supporting our students' health and well-being was an integral part of what we wanted to do, and we needed to do more research. So we put in a grant proposal to the Arts and Humanities Research Council for a project called Musical Impact. Luckily, they funded that grant, and I want to show you now some results that came from there. So as part of this study, it was a 4-year study, and throughout this time we carried out rather in-depth physical and mental fitness assessments with over 600 musicians nationwide, in-depth vocal health screening with over 150 singers carried out by a team who came in from Berlin, based at Charité Hospital. We also did 4-hour-long biomechanical assessments, physiological assessments. We did in-depth interviews as well, because sometimes being measured and prodded can only get you so far, so you need to ask people what they do in terms of promoting their health. And from this, I think we're in a position where we can offer new evidence-based approaches to promoting and enhancing the health and well-being of musicians. Let me just give you a sample of results from this first study that's listed here with the mental and physical fitness assessments. So we had around 600 student musicians from the UK come into the study. They did consent. In stage 2, we measured them in terms of various lifestyle factors, drinking, smoking, psychological factors in terms of perfectionism, attitudes towards health and well-being. We looked at their experience of pain and injury. We also, in stage 3, we did a range of anthropometric measurements looking at their sit and reach scores, core strength, core flexibility, aerobic fitness, sub-maximal aerobic fitness assessments, because when we suggested maybe doing some maximal cardiovascular fitness assessments, nobody wanted to do them. And then we sent them off with a debrief. So in the end, we have 483 usable data sets. Just as an example here, so we have 59% women, 41% men, averaging 22 years old, 42% from Britain, and 58% from 30 other countries. Mostly undergraduate and predominantly classical, and that just happened to be the makeup of the conservatoires that we were dealing with. So let's go back to this issue of performance-related pain. I told you that based on the literature, we would see anywhere between 70 and 85% of musicians reporting performance-related pain at any given time. So we thought, well, surely the problem is all those violinists, right? Because they're sitting there asymmetrically playing for hour in and hour out. So we wanted to see, well, let's divide our musicians into those who play symmetrical instruments where they have clear and straightforward body alignment versus those who predominantly play with an asymmetrical body alignment. And surely what we're going to find is that all the pain is being reported by those people who are playing asymmetrically all the time. Well, I'm a bit red-faced now, but the answer is no. Whether you've got symmetrical or asymmetrical, the reports of performance-related pain is consistently high among everybody. And again, in our study, we tend to show, as those others, that we're coming in between 75, 78% of those musicians reporting performance-related pain at any given time. Now, as part of this study, that's not very trivial. I mean, you could easily get those data from the existing literature, but we also wanted to trial out a new pain drawing app so that musicians could shade in the parts of the body that were hurting. If they're having pain, the question is, well, where does it hurt? And so we used this new interface. And what we see here is that among men, the pain is coming in, shoulders and upper back, a little bit in the lower back. Of course, we do see some arm-related pain, but the problem seems to be driven by things around the neck, shoulders, and lower back. And among women, it's the same story, but it seems to be worse. Now, I did tell you that we did fitness assessments, and we did look at core strength and flexibility and compared our results from our musicians versus other university students, and they are significantly worse than other university students in terms of core strength and flexibility. And they also significantly sit around a lot more in practice sessions doing difficult things. So it's not at all surprising that you would find pain there if you aren't as fit as your age-matched controls, and you are doing things that can put stress and strain in areas of core strength and flexibility. So this is published in a journal called Pain Practice. I'm sure all of you subscribe to Pain Practice. No? Okay, well, you don't. Well, you can get it free and download, even if you don't subscribe through that DOI there. I'm very happy to circulate papers as well. Okay. Let's look, though, apart from reports of pain and injury, let's look at how attitudes develop as a result of health and well-being. So we had a number of standardized measures that we applied in a survey form when students came in for their individual assessments. You can look at the SF-36, and there's some standardized measures on people's general health. And compared with age-matched controls, our musicians score significantly worse in terms of their general health and well-being, the way they perceive their health. In terms of well-being, well, we used the Warwick-Edinburgh Mental Well-Being Scale. It's a short we used the short version. It's a 7-item survey which can be done very quickly, and that was essential for this study. And what we found here is that our musicians scored significantly higher than age-matched controls. So health is lower, their perceptions of health is lower, but their well-being scores tend to be higher. And then the question is, well, what is it about well-being? Are they happy? You know, are they really scoring high on the happy side of things? Or is it about the meaning that they take out of their work? And yes, that's right. It's all about the meaning that they take out. So they tend to love what they do. They have very fulfilling careers often. They're doing things that they're highly motivated to do. They're definitely not happier than anybody else, but they seem to have higher levels of eudaimonic well-being. So we have a disconnect. We've got people who generally perceive poor health, but they have high well-being. So it could be that this is in a way driving some of that. But we also found men scored higher on this. Now, this seems to be an odd peculiarity of some of the findings across the literature where men sometimes score higher on well-being scales. I think it's probably down just to delusion rather than actual fact. But there we have it. Our results were comparable with that. Okay, health-promoting behaviors. To what extent do you do things that help make you healthy in your life? So compared with other university students, overall, they were significantly worse. In terms of health responsibility, what that means is that if you have a problem, you're going to seek help from somebody who can help you professionally, and they do that worse. In terms of doing physical activity, they do less. They're significantly worse in managing stress, and as we know, that musicians don't get stressed very much, do they? So they're significantly worse at doing that. There's no difference with nutrition, spiritual growth, and interpersonal relations. And with nutrition, well, most university students eat rubbish anyway, so our musicians eat equally rubbish. But as it happens, women tend to outscore men both in terms of nutrition and also importantly in terms of developing good interpersonal relations. Okay, let's move on to the next one. In terms of sleep, it's a bad situation. So we looked at sleep quantity and quality through the Pittsburgh Sleep Scale, and musicians tend to score worse in everything. In terms of perfectionism, it's like Star Wars. There's a dark side and a light side to perfectionism. It's good to strive to be well, but it's not good if you can't be perfect to have negative reactions. And what we found is that, well, musicians do score higher than other people at university in terms of striving perfection, but they also have more negative reactions when they aren't perfect. And that in total, we see in the literature, tends to lead to some rather bad behaviors in terms of health promotion. And then coping strategies. What are the ways in which they deal with challenges when it comes to it? So positive reinterpretation is to say, well, look, this isn't a challenge, this is an opportunity. Well, they're no different from other university students. They tend to be worse in terms of planning. Active coping, rather than burying their heads in the sand, they tend to be worse there. The use of instrumental social support, they tend to be worse there. Suppression of competing activities, they're no different. And then focusing on inventing of emotions, they tend to be worse. Women tend to do better both in terms of use of instrumental social support and focusing on inventing of emotions. Let me just sum this up again. So in terms of general health, not really good signals here compared with other age-matched controls. Well-being, that's good, okay. Health-promoting behaviors, nope. Sleep, nope. Perfectionism, nope. Coping strategies, no. This is depressing, right? Actually, this whole situation has become much more depressing going through the pandemic, dealing with freelance workers whose incomes have been stripped entirely away from them, with depression and anxiety levels going through the roof, more so with women actually than men. And we actually see that in terms of the qualitative work there, that women were reporting more of an onus in terms of the caring responsibilities and other domestic responsibilities, so they had that labored onto them as well. So it's really not a good set of circumstances. Now, should you be interested in reading more, you can find papers with all the data and the analyses here with direct links to the freely downloadable papers. And this is a qualitative study that we did looking at how people experience both barriers and enablers to their health and well-being. Okay, so at the end of this research study, Conservatoires UK and colleagues across these institutions were at a point where we said, well, look, we really need to do something about this. We need to be much more proactive in promoting health and well-being. So we wanted to look at some examples in different parts of the world, and there are some really nice university-led networks in the US and Canada. There's one in the UK called Healthy Universities. The Royal College of Music is a member institution of Healthy Universities. We go to their meetings. It's really good in terms of seeing, well, what is the good practice that's being used out there internationally, and how can we use it in our place? The problem with this is that music students are often quite different from other university students. So next door at Imperial College, the physics course is very challenging, very hard, of course, but they aren't examined in front of 100 people. They're not in a practice room 6, 7, 8 hours a day working on their physics. I mean, those colleagues say, well, yes, they have 100 equations rather than 100 audience members. But the thing is that the things that music students do really are qualitative and quantitatively different from other university students. So we constituted a network called Healthy Conservatoires. And our mission here, our aim is to create environments that promote and enhance the health and well-being of performing artists, enabling them to achieve their full potential and to build healthy and sustainable careers. All the member institutions of Conservatoires UK send representatives to our network meetings, and we look after not just musicians, but also dancers, actors, circus performers who are in the National School of Circus Arts as well. So we use a settings-based approach to health. We recognize that health is an integral part of where you live, of where you work, the places where you socialize and how you function. We are focusing on promoting health rather than responding to clinical problems. So in the UK, we have the British Association for Performing Arts Medicine. If students have direct medical problems, they can seek free advice and help from those doctors. So we work with BAPAM, but in the educational context, we want to promote health and we want to try to prevent problems occurring so that they may not need to go to BAPAM. What we do is informed by the demands of performing, and we engage directly with research. So we meet 3 times per year. After the pandemic, these moved online, and the attendance shot up because people don't have to travel across the country. We have around 250 members of the network who attend our meetings, and you can attend from wherever. It's free to attend. You just need to go to the website, which I'll show you in a moment, and to log your interest. As part of this, we've developed some case studies of good practice. So if there's an excellent initiative that's happening at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, I'd like to know about it so that I might take it over to the Royal College of Music, and we can adapt and slightly shift and change that based on our differences with Guildhall and so on. And we also try to map expertise and services across the sector. Most of our institutions are small, independent, specialist institutions who cannot afford to duplicate these massive health resources across institutions. So at the Royal College of Music, we rely on the Imperial College Health Center and some of their experts. And at other universities, like at the Royal Northern College of Music, they'll rely on Manchester Metropolitan University or University of Manchester. But we also know who's who across that network. So I can draw somebody in from Glasgow if I need a speaker for our students. And we take a very rounded view on what it means to be well. That includes elements of emotional, intellectual, occupational well-being, but also financial well-being, physical well-being, social, environmental, and spiritual. So a healthy conservatoire, as all of our institutions now are hoping to be, engages with health and well-being across all of these core constituent parts of our core business. So we all develop resources and services and run courses and professional development opportunities in health and well-being. We have policies that are built into, health and well-being is built into the policies that we have for our institutions. We think about health and well-being when it comes to the relationship with the community and to the profession, and even some of the conversations that we have with the professional orchestras and other ensembles where our students will go on to have jobs. Thinking about health and well-being within the environment. Should practice rooms really be available 24 hours a day, let's say? And we also do health and well-being in terms of research. And then this, when our network comes together, we're able then to survey and to bring that good practice together where we can. So, should you wish to find out more, our Twitter account, or whatever it's called now, is H Conservatoires. We do have a YouTube channel, which I'll say a little bit more about in a second. And then we have a website, healthyconservatoires.org. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel, by the way, that really does help things. This is the website. What I want to just briefly say a little bit about this YouTube channel. So in the resources section, what you'll find is a series of films, case studies, and links to programs, and so on. Now, if you look in the film section, we've got 3 different series of films. The first is called Research in Performers' Health. So you recall that paper that I published in Pain Practice, read by a sum total of probably 12 people. Well, we've made the movie. So we've got a short 4-minute film that describes the paper. What did we do? What did we find? And what does it mean? And so there, we've tried to curate this experience and some of the rather cumbersome sets of knowledge for students who may wish to find out more, but who would rather spend 4 minutes, rather than downloading the papers that I spend so much time working on. Okay. Our second series is looking at specialist support for performers. So I mentioned that we've got links with the British Association for Performing Arts Medicine. They have a number of medical specialists who volunteer their time. Now, one of the real barriers, I think, for music students or any musician accessing medical help is that medicine can be a very complicated field. Who do you see? When do you see? How do you get to that person? So what we've done is to curate a series of just 2-minute introductions to different types of medical experts. Who is a general practitioner? And what would they do with you as a musician? What about a psychiatrist or psychologist? What about a physiotherapist? So we've got these short introductory videos. And I think using behavioral economics as our sort of guiding principle, it's often very good to, rather than motivate people to seek help, it's often good to remove the barriers that prevent them from getting help anyway. So what we're trying to do here is to remove barriers, and I think that's probably better than just me telling people that they should go and do things. And then the third type of film that we have on the site looks at general guidance on certain aspects. One that we generated pretty early on is how to do a risk assessment in the period of the COVID-19 pandemic, or which includes things about physical distance and space, or how to teach online. So we generated some films around that. So healthyconservatoires.org. And I'll finish just with a few ideas for moving forward. A lot of the research that we had through Musical Impact, it was in the early days of this research, and we really set out to say, well, look, we want to understand the problem that musicians have, and irrespective of which specialism, irrespective of certain issues that may be relevant for men and women, I know that a lot more work needs to be done, and we'll hear about some of that today in terms of looking at pockets within that broader community. I just want to focus on a few general things that we should be thinking about. The first area is just within the field of performance education. So what should we be doing with our students? Well, I've mentioned to you that we do some of these modules here with a compulsory health module for students here in year 1. I mean, I would love to see one that also comes back around in year 4, because the things we may have taught them in year 1 will perhaps long have since been forgotten. But we're working on that. But I think we need to push in that direction. One approach that I would like to that I've started to draw in that we use in this module, and I've drawn in from sport, is to think about the team around the performer, right? So you've got your individual performer. Now, in the superbly financed world of elite level sport, you can actually have a team around you that helps get you there. But our musicians are never going to have that. But it's worth thinking about, well, if you could have a team around you, who are the team members? And let's make sure that we've got everybody around that circle. So now, in conservatoires, of course, you've got your instrumental teacher, and they will give you expert advice in terms of what they do. We need to think about who are those people in our team that are providing direct and can provide direct positive health support. Psychological support, and the mental health support is I classify up in here, but the psychological support here is largely around the sorts of things that sports psychologists do in terms of mental focusing and mental practice. Social support, learning support, so how to practice and learn effectively in different environments and under different levels of stress and pressure. Actually using performance as an instance for learning and reviewing how performances go in a state that's actually positive and constructive. Career support, and then also how you can innovate. So it's not that any musician will ever have a team of people that will be provided for them there. But if you are a freelance musician or you're actually developing your career, it's worth thinking, well, do I need, I would use this as a prompt to say, well, who could I access if I need that sort of support, and how would I find them? And maybe even working with some of the charities in the UK, like the Royal Society of Musicians or Help Musicians UK, how could I get funding to help pay for that even? And it is available. Okay, so that's one area. So I think we need to do better in terms of the education and training. I think we need to do better in terms of the research. We need more data here. We need long-term data. I would love to see a cohort study of musicians that goes and is collecting data every 2 or maybe every 5 years, going back and forth on thousands of musicians, similar to what you would find with these large epidemiological data sets, like the English Longitudinal Study of Aging. Every 5 years, there's tens of thousands of people who are providing this. I did put in a proposal for something like that, which didn't get funding. So anyway, let's collaborate and think of how we might work this out. But if we are collecting data, it's really important to be with musicians, be that bridge between what the data means, right? I could collect lots of data on you, but as a practitioner, as a performer, what is it going to really mean to you? To help give you that performance advantage. So we need to work on that too. Just had a visit to St. George's Park, which is the home base for the English national football teams. And they've got a team of 80 data scientists that feed directly into the coaching staff. It's fabulous. And they've got big money, of course, to do that. But we don't have a team of 80 data scientists. But it would be great to look at how we can develop systems to make data more easily applied. Okay, I'll stop on that. Now, the third area is to look at not just networks like Healthy Conservatoires, but to look at international alliances. And we've very nicely been able to set up and help set up a Healthy Conservatoires network in Australia, one in Brazil, one in Mexico. And it's great to have that, and one in Brazil, that international perspective and dialogue here. So I would not call that a network, I would call it an alliance of international networks. That's another thing that we could do. And then finally, the fourth thing is to work more directly in the policy space. I'm just an academic. I don't really engage well with politicians, and I don't want to engage with politicians. However, somebody needs to do this, and integrating that training into what our PhD students are doing could be a really interesting endeavor. There is in the UK, I'll just give you an example, there's something called the Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Center. They just, in the last 2 months, produced a report based on research that is directed at policymakers called Unleashing Creativity, Fixing the Finance Gap in the Creative Industries. And there's a huge finance gap when you're dealing with huge proportions of freelance workers out there. So, someone needs to do this, and we need to think about how we engage policymakers. I don't mean just politicians, but we set policies in our institutions, in our employment, places of employment, and we need to think about health and well-being as part of that package. And on that basis, I think I'll stop. I'll thank you very much. And just to say, if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for such inspiring, depressing in certain ways, but very helpful and very much in need reflection. I think I have a number of questions, but let's open the floor for questions first. Any question?
Yes, thank you so much. Very great to see the overview of all that's happening. It's very impressive. I was wondering about the teachers at the institutions. How do you involve them into the musicians' health strategies?
Yeah, so I think on a number of fronts. With the first year course that we run, Anna Dattari, who's in charge of that course, works with the faculties to direct some of the health and well-being funds and the resources through the faculty route, so that if the head of vocal studies wants to do something, then she now can get access to certain resources to help roll that through. It's light touch. We engage with teachers also through our lab space, which is a performance simulation space where we recreate the conditions of performance and stress, so that that actual lessons can be delivered in that space, and then the focus would be around the student's performance of a piece rather than just the piece which they then go and perform. And it's also important to have buy-in at all different levels of the institution. So the fact that we have a core curriculum module in year one is an important signal that the institution sends to say this is an important topic for this college. So I think very importantly, we do make some resources available for students in case they want to suggest certain initiatives that they run at certain points in the year. We can actually fund those as well. So I think it's worth working across the full spectrum of the institution. But yes, I mean the teachers are so adored by the students that it's important that the message is coming from them as well. And I think there has been a real shift in time since the 25 years that I've worked at the RCM in terms of how attitudes towards health, well-being, and peak performance have changed, and the way that science can have a role in informing that.
Yeah, thanks a lot for a wonderful lecture and so many different perspectives. So, two questions. First of all, now you have been doing what you could call interventions, or at least you've been talking about it and thinking about it for some time. But then, have you seen a difference, an improvement of some sorts? And if so, how would you measure or quantify that also in such a way that, for example, that you can also, when you're going to talk to policymakers, etc., they often you need some facts, right? So how would you be able to see that you actually get an improvement?
Yeah, I'll focus on one area in particular, and then I'll stop. But I think there are a number of ways in which interventions can have a direct impact on focusing attention, helping students memorize music, and so on and so forth. But the thing that I'll focus on is this shift in attitude that we've seen since I first came to the college, and what the attitude towards health and well-being from that point to this point. So when I went to the college, I was basically hired in to run a project where we were working with sports psychologists and sports scientists and other people coming in who were delivering sort of sports interventions for students. And the sports psychologist pulled me aside in the early days of this project and said, look, these students are coming in and they're using these as counseling sessions. And I said, well, okay, well, we have a counselor. And the bottom line was that they weren't really using the resources that we had available. essentially because of stigma around using those resources. So these days, there's not that at all. So we have a real demand for more resource. The topics are now on the table for discussion rather than being sort of shoved under the table. It's interesting, I mean, in terms of injury in sport, on the back page of many newspapers, you'll see this player has this injury and that one and that. And for years, the music world, I mean, it was really hush-hush about this. And you see in, say, 88 with Gary Graffman's article around his focal dystonia, that, that was a real opening door moment that allowed people the license to talk about this. So we clearly are in a point now where things have changed, and by the time we get Musical Impact Project going, the conservatories are saying, well, this topic of health and well-being is the one where we want to collaborate and not compete. So that's the main sort of shift that I've seen over that time. Yeah.
Thank you. One more question?
I wonder if there's any data collected or studies about why students don't make it through their degree. So what is it of all of these problems that's bad enough for the students who don't make it through that they cannot continue?
Yeah, that's very interesting. We haven't done much around dropout. I mean, the dropout rates tend to be pretty low in conservatoires anyway. I think where the dropout tends to happen is after the conservatoire. And then you think, well, because we saw with the study, with the results in terms of students reporting performance-related pain versus professionals, the percentages are higher among students, and it's probably the case that they make it through their studies, then they're hit hard on with the life and the realities of working freelance, and then suddenly, during the pandemic, one of the bits of advice from the government was, well, consider retraining. And the fields that they were suggesting were things like plumbing and that sort of thing. So, yeah, and that's why I think we need this cohort study to look at people year in and year out, those longer-term patterns with larger data sets, which I would really welcome doing something like that.
Yeah. So I'm also wondering about the change in some of their attitudes and behaviors as they go through the 4 years. And I wonder if being surrounded by people who are also not sleeping properly and living a very healthy way, and we know that the atmosphere can be, maybe it depends on the particular institution, but it's often competitive.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of becomes their normal, and maybe they push themselves into worse situations.
Yeah. So yeah, and we didn't collect sort of pre-entry or early entry and then graduation data. We collected those data sort of years 2 and 3 when we could get participants in. But yeah, that would be a really great way of looking at it. A lot of our students are coming in from the specialist music schools where you might actually suggest that some of the attitudes are pretty well entrenched already. And then they go in and that just sort of spreads. And you see the over-practicing or that may happen across the board. Yeah.
Thank you. I also have one question. You mentioned differences between men and women, and how better overall is the health in men compared to women, in a way.
In some respects. So yeah, what I would say there is that we see, I mean, in terms of physical fitness, they're not all that, I mean, it's directly comparable because we were looking at fitness levels compared with age and sex-matched controls. So they're not better necessarily in that respect. We did see with regard to the perceptions and attitudes towards health that women were scoring better than men on many health promotion measures and coping strategies. I think the well-being finding, that seemed to have disappeared after the pandemic because we have collected further data since then, where musicians aren't scoring higher than anyone else in the population in terms of well-being, based on what they've been through. But we did see that the degree of performance-related pain and injury might be more common among women. So that's an area where I think we could also do more work. it's worth looking at, you know, these areas where there are strengths and trying to build upon that, but also help to bring up areas where there are differences that might be optimized. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other question?
Thank you very much for your lovely and very interesting presentation. I would like to know more about the compulsory course. Is it about strategies to prevent injury, or you actually go into the specifics of the physiology of the movements required for musical gestures according to the instrument?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we don't do that. It's more about general attitudes and perceptions towards health, dealing with stress, managing stress, and a range of factors that are more psychologically driven. So we have 8 sessions in the first term. Well, for half the students in the first term, and then the other half get it in the second term. And then through the faculties, the faculty heads can then decide, well, I'd like to run this particular program for my singers or for my violinists because that's what I think would be useful for them. So we redirect resource in that way so that they can take that forward. I think it's much better to look at that from through the faculty perspective because it is so very different depending on what people play. Yeah.
Any other question? Perhaps I can conclude with another question for you.
Okay.
What about age?
Mm-hmm.
I understand that most of research that you conducted is based on students' level.
Mm-hmm.
So within the bachelor or master window, or even longer, can you try to speculate on the role that age can have on their well-being?
Yeah. Generally speaking, what we found, we did look with several hundred musicians through responses of a survey at different points during the pandemic, that older musicians were more better to weather that storm in terms of their mental health and well-being. Otherwise, though, we've been focusing mainly on conservatoire level students. So with regard to sort of physical health and aging, I suppose what I could say is that with what you tend to see is that for older musicians, they tend to be fit, but fit for doing the particular things that they're doing, right? So, you know, I'm not a viola player, I'm a trumpet player, but holding a viola for the length of a full Mahler symphony would be quite a workout for me, but not for any viola player, they can do it. So they tend to be fit for their instrument, but the question is, how does that relate to other aspects of fitness in the rest of their life? And I'm sure there are other people in the room who are better suited to answer that than me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Professor Williamson.
Thanks.
Our next keynote speaker is Dr. Philippa La. She's an associate professor of music education at the Faculty of Education at the National University of Distance Education in Madrid, in Spain, where she runs the Laboratory for Voice, Music and Language. Her primary research interests include singing pedagogy, with a focus on the physiological aspects of both female and male vocal performances, and exploring educational technological interfaces to optimize singers' performances and their teaching and learning processes throughout their developmental stages. The title of her talk is Menopause and Musicians' Health and Well-Being: Important Considerations for Singers and Wind Instrumentalists. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Philippa La.
receiving me here at Oslo. It's my first time in Norway, and I'm already overwhelmed with the beauty of the country. So thank you, and especially to Sara de Mario, who invited me to be here to talk about menopause. I will start with a small background about sex steroid hormones, because there are many types of hormones, and we will be focused on those and what they do to the voice. So I will be talking mainly about singers. And then to understand menopause, I will briefly touch menopausal stages, and then I will look more into the research that I've been conducting on how menopause may affect the respiratory subsystem, but also the oscillatory, that is the vocal folds, the resonatory, the vocal tract, and the neuromotor control of speech and singing. So the endocrine system is very important, because it is the way we have to mediate the response of our body to the environment. And we have several organs in our body responsible for that. And for this talk, I will be only talking about the steroid hormones that are produced mainly in the testes and in the ovaries, but also in the adrenal glands that are responsible for the production of cortisol, the stress hormone. And today in this talk, we will be hearing about androgens, estrogens, and progesterone. They are all the types of sex hormones that both males and females produce. And we will see that we will be focusing more on females, and we will understand later on why. So, believe it or not, we have specific receptors in the mucosa of the vocal folds for this type of hormones. Here is a histological cut of one vocal fold, and you can see the epithelium, that is this part of cells that are exteriorly located in the vocal fold. And then you have the superficial lamina propria, that is a very jelly kind of a tissue, the macula flava, and the vocal ligament, that is what makes the vocal fold be more thicker or thinner. And in all these subunits, you can find receptors for sex steroid hormones. Here you have the females represented with the gray fences, and males with the dark fence, and you have the blue representing the receptors we can find for testosterone, in red for estrogens, and in purple for progesterone. And you can see that the vocal ligament, that is what gives the shape to the vocal folds, has many receptors, as well as the macula flava. The other parts have fewer receptors. And the highest number of receptors for these hormones are actually those that link or that are attaching to testosterone and to estrogen. So these two types of hormones do impact on how the vocal folds of singers and of any speaker are. And when you look at how we, men and women, change hormones through lifespan, you can see that here I only represent testosterone and estrogens. The estradiol is the most common estrogen in the body. And you can see here in blue and this line, the testosterone in males, and how it varies since from the uterus before the baby is born until he becomes an adult male, and then an aging male. And also how the male estradiol changes across lifespan, and the same for females in red. And you can see that at the time of puberty, there's a very much abrupt and rapid increase in estradiol for females and in testosterone for males. But also at when we are babies, we have already like a burst in these hormones. But at puberty, that burst is more marked. And then in the reproductive years, females will change cyclically these hormones. Their concentrations will not be the same. They will change according to the menstrual cycle. And as you can see here, by the age of 50 years old, we have an event called menopause, more or less, and which is defined with a markedly reduction of estradiol. And of course, at the age of 50, females are expected to work fully in their jobs, and this decrease of testosterone in males only happen after the 70s. So at that age, they are already retired. And this has an impact in our lives and how we work, how we react to things, and I will be talking about that, about specifically singers. But we can generalize and say that due to the complexity of the female's reproductive endocrine system, female musicians, and also I would say that singers, although I tend to think of a singer as a musician anyway, but you know, sometimes I was talking earlier on when we came here, you often see some like advertising a course for musicians and singers, but I hope you understand what I say. Female voices are more prone to these cyclical variations, and I am a singer as well as a researcher, so I wanted to know more about this, because also I think that research about female musicians is less available than for male singers and other musicians. And here is a sum up of when you can expect changes in the voice, not only for males and females at puberty, but especially for females during the menstrual cycle, when they get pregnant, when they achieve menopause, and of course, if they take hormonal medications. Some, like for example, oral contraceptive pills, or even when the menopausal transition kicks in, and this, so the quality of life and the well-being is so poor that you need to talk to your GP or a specialist, a gynecologist, and take hormonal replacement therapy. And why do the voice change at these moments? Because let's take the example of the cyclical variations that occur in sex steroid hormones during the menstrual cycle. In 1974, Van Gelder found, he was an ENT working at the Eastern European opera houses, and he found several female singers with changes in the vocal folds. Changes like an edema, increased vascularity. We have blood vessels that run parallel in the vocal folds and that become a bit swollen or a bit numerous, as you will see in one picture. And singers would complain a lot to him about loss of flexibility, hoarseness, loss of vocal brightness, high notes were very difficult to sing. Some would say that they wouldn't have the same breathing capacity to sustain long phrases as they usually have. They complain more about vocal fatigue, and others are even complaining about being not able to sing at particular phases of their menstrual cycle. And when he was observing the vocal folds, he called it laryngopathia menstrualis. And of course, singers wouldn't talk openly about this because they would be afraid of losing their jobs. But if you are a famous singer, maybe you have the guts to come up and openly talk about it. And I just wanted to show you an example of someone that is not amongst us anymore, that said, I don't think there's ever a moment when you are not aware of the next performance. Everything affects the voice just being at all tired. And let's face it, at certain times of the month for a woman, cloudiness, fuzziness gets on the voice. So this cloudiness, fuzziness, she was referring to her menstrual cycle. And why is that? Well, here is a representation of the variation in progesterone here in orange, testosterone in blue, orange is estradiol, testosterone in blue, and here is progesterone in purple. And these variations are normalized to the maximum value so that the hormonal variations can be compared, because normally you measure these hormones in different units. And you can see that when all hormones are low, we are at the menstrual phase when the cervix is closed, low, tetal, firm and dry. Then you have a burst in estradiol and also a little bit of testosterone that increases the libido, and ovulation occurs. And if there is fecundation, this progesterone is high to allow the baby to be developed in the womb. But if fecundation didn't occur, then all hormones drop again and the new cycle starts. And this repeats every month. And believe it or not, when we compare the response of the cells in our womb, the cervix, the neck of the womb, with the response of the cells in the mucosa of the vocal folds to these hormonal variations, they respond in a similar way. And this was found in 1959 by two ENTs in Spain, Perello and Comas, and then was repeated by Jean Abitbol later on in 1989. This makes not just the skin being responsive to these hormones, but also the vocal folds. And what we have in the cervix, the transformations across the menstrual cycle, also will have something similar in the vocal folds happening. So we found that with increased estrogens, there is a thicker epithelium, the literature found, and an increased vascularity. So this will lead to slight edema, and this microviruses is related with these vessels that become a bit swollen. And with the progesterone, there is this thicker mucus production. So singers report the more need to throat clearing to do the, that is not very good to do anyway, but actually is connected with the high progesterone in the luteal phase of the cycle. So here you see the vocal folds of 3 females. And you see the true vocal folds are here, and you see that they have small vessels, and this normally is not like that. Normally it's all white and clean, and you don't observe many vessels going on. But in the luteal phase of the cycle, when you have progesterone in their higher concentrations, you see this correlation, this positive correlation between progesterone levels and vascularity in the vocal folds. And these symptoms seem to affect every 1 in 3 females. What about contraception? Just to let you know that here you can see a natural menstrual cycle with this variation that you saw in previous graph of estradiol and progesterone. And when you take oral contraceptives, you fool around the body, so these hormones are dumped, and you don't have this trigger of pituitary hormones to change and produce follicles that will become in the ovary available for fecundation. And my PhD was about what happened to the voice when you take an oral contraceptive pill. And I will be very fast going on with this because this presentation is about menopause. But it's just to show you that with the menstrual phase of the cycle with low hormones and the cervical changes you have in the cervix, you see that the fundamental frequency and its variation in speaking of singers becomes lower just when you are not taking an oral contraceptive pill. So what we done here was a double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trial in which singers were taking 3 months of OCP and 3 months of a dummy pill, not knowing when they were taking what. Thank God I got ethics at that time and nobody got pregnant. But you see that their speaking pitch drops a little bit in the menstruation. Then I was also interested to see what about the regularity of vibration of the vocal folds. You see here an equipment that I have that is called electrolaryngography. It's 2 electrodes that you place non-invasively externally in the throat of the singers, and then you know that there is a correlation between the signal that it produces when the vocal folds are in contact in a cycle. There is a peak peak in the wave, and when they decontact and they are not contacting anymore, you see this part of the wave. And by studying the regularity of the repetition of this signal and also how the shape of the waveform looks like, you can have a non-invasively picture of what is going on inside the body, in this case the larynx. And here you can see a pathological case in the right vocal fold is a bit bigger than the left one, and you can see that the wave shape of the EGG, that is the electrolaryngograph or electroglottography, is completely different. And by studying the shape, we found that when they were taking the pill, the singer's voice became more regular for the menstrual and for the follicular phase as compared with the placebo, because there was less irregularity in the signal. Also, we asked about what about intonation? Is the feedback loop of singing in tune affected by hormones? And we can see that actually when they were taking an oral contraceptive pill, their perception of how much they need to do to sing in tune was affected. And actually the octave interval that you see here, this is pa-da-da-da-da, it was shorter. So there's something going on with the brain and oral contraceptive pill, but nobody has studied that yet. I hope in the future I could. And also the vibrato was slower for the follicular phase with comparison with the placebo. So there are things going on actually with hormones. The fundamental frequency, for example, is dependent on concentrations of testosterone and how it impacts on water retention, because if you have more water retention in the vocal folds, you can have a more irregular vibrato patterns of the vocal folds, and also the pitch and the intonation will be affected because testosterone has irreversible impact on the way the tissues can stretch. And are built. And also we have hypothesized that perhaps the neural control system is also affected by hormones, because actually looking at the neural transmission in other in medical studies, you see that the reduction of both ovarian hormones and testosterone are both associated with the slowing down of the neural transmission, the speed of the neural transmission. So hormones affect auditive function across the menstrual cycle. There are studies about how much we respond to perceptions of sound across the menstrual cycle. The previous literature have found that high concentrations of estrogens have an excitatory effect and facilitates auditory information, but on the other hand, high concentrations of progesterone will counterbalance these effects and will have a negative impact in the ear and central auditory systems. And also there are studies showing that postmenopausal women that take hormonal replacement therapy, based on audiogram thresholds, they decrease their auditive sensitivity, and also they show a worse performance on hearing in background noise tests. That normally musicians are much better than non-musicians in noisy environments to discriminate speech, for example. And perhaps during the menopause and taking hormonal replacement therapy will have an impact on that. But unfortunately, there's no much research about it. But what we can say is that sex steroid hormones influence vocal fold tissue and mucus viscosity, neural function, motor movement, auditory motor integration, and sensory thresholds. So these all facts interact and might alter how we behave vocally during the menstrual cycle and when we take hormonal medications such as the oral contraceptive pill. And that is very hard to say if it's this hormone or that hormone or the other hormone, because we cannot isolate these hormones in the body. So we really need to go into more depth in this to understand what we can do to improve singers in this phase of the life that is menopause. And why is that? Because, as you can see here, not only estradiol decreases very significantly with menopause, but also other hormones like follicle-stimulating hormone, that is a pituitary hormone, raises. And also other hormones like testosterone and progesterone also decrease. But of course, the extent of the decrease is not the same for all the sex steroid hormones. So I invite you to think along these lines. If we have receptors in the mucosa for these hormones, they are all the same chemical family, and estradiol drops so much, the receptors for that hormone will be available to be connected with other similar hormones, and the reduction of testosterone is not so much in the menopause. So maybe the effects that we see might be related with not an increase in testosterone, because we don't produce more testosterone, we produce less, but because it's similarly and can attach to these receptors that were attached to estrogens, and estrogen is not there anymore. So, studying menopause is very difficult. Aaron Williman was saying something that I really liked, and I also relate to. We need longitudinal studies, because what we have is majority are comparative studies, and some results that I'm going to show you are also of comparison of pre with postmenopausal women, but will be very important to have a longitudinal big study with musicians and with singers, because menopause can only be defined retrospectively. By definition, it corresponds to 12 months without a menstrual cycle, or what we call the menorrhea. And for a long period, there is a transition where you can have cycles very varied in length, and also some 3 months of amenorrhea, and then a new cycle. So, and this can go on and on, and we never know when menopause will happen. But by definition, it happens when you have these 12 consecutive months of amenorrhea. And before you achieve those 12 months, you might experience for some years hot flashes, night sweats, problems with sleeping, more irritability. Don't mess with a soprano in those times. I'm joking. And these symptoms might even go further a little bit after you have menopause. And age is not a good predictor of menopause, because it depends on lifestyle, on nutrition, on race, genetics. So it is very hard to do a longitudinal study, and that's why nowadays the Stage of Reproductive Aging workshop advises us to study, if we do comparative studies, to rely not only on age, but also on these stages based on a linear scale, where 0 moment is menopause, -1 is transitional, and +1 is early postmenopause. And you might think, oh, but that happens later on in life. Well, if we look at, for example, the female life expectancy in Norway, it's about 85 years old for females, and the mean age in Norway of menopause is about 52.79 years, which gives us about 40% of the female's lifetime is spent in postmenopause. So I think it's a considerable time in a life that we should think of. Many books explain that menopause can affect the central nervous system, the skin, the weight and metabolic changes, sexual function, urogenital system, and muscular system. But few talk about the voice. And the voice is constituted by three, we say three main subunits, but I would like to think about four, because without the brain we cannot do anything. All these subsystems are affected by sex steroid hormones and therefore menopause. So my first question in my recent research project I had in Spain was what happens to neuromotor control of singers and of speaking habits of these singers. We know from the literature that the high estrogen concentrations enhance attention and also reduce distractibility and facilitates emotional processing. So I think understanding neuromotor control is something important. And also because aging, and we might considering, it's very polemic because nowadays we consider aging much later than 50 years old. But if you look at the biological aging, menopause is the beginning of biological aging. And there are many things with aging happening. For example, our motor precision will be different. There's reports in the literature that explain that with aging, for example, pianists tend to change the speed of a piece because they can wrap up better what happens with aging. The speed of articulatory gestures and the segmental and suprasegmental aspects of speech articulation are affected with aging. And what I looked at with comparing pre with postmenopausal singers was two aspects of segmental aspects of speech articulation: laryngeal gestures, which is called laryngeal diadochokinesis, and also syllable repetition as a form of oral diadochokinesis. And also I look at the patterns of changing fundamental frequency. So I had 53 female professional voice singers, voice users, singers and teachers of singing, who didn't smoke, were healthy volunteers. We applied the STRAW criteria for allocating them into pre- and postmenopausal groups. So we also based our criteria not only in the reports of the participants, but also on hormonal levels. And then here it's our population. We in the premenopause group we have women, of course, with a different age. Is a 10 years gap between pre and post menopause. And also here the days of menstruation are very much different, which corroborates the correct allocation of participants into these two groups, and also the presence of menopausal symptoms. And then here we work in collaboration with the Hospital Clínico de Madrid, where we invented a form of acoustic tent to be able to collect the voice of singers. And the equipment we use, you can see that we have two microphones, one stand mic and one headset mic. And then we have the electrolaryngograph, or in this case, the electroglottograph, to study non-invasively the pattern of vibration of the vocal folds. Then we have two RESP bands to study also the breathing patterns. And then we have also a subglottal pressure meter to assess the amount of subglottal pressure we need to put the vocal folds into vibration. And then after they have been recorded, doing a performance of several tasks. In this case, I will present oral diadochokinesis and laryngeal diadochokinesis, speech articulation and speech rate. We also took a blood sample from them to assess several hormones besides sex steroid hormones that are responsible for menopausal changes. And this is our inclusive and exclusive criteria. I will not go into too much detail. But what you see here is the results of the concentrations of hormones that are clearly different for the follicle stimulating hormone and for estradiol. So we see that after menopause they don't have too much estradiol and they have much more follicle stimulating hormones. So we corroborate that they were actually at post-menopause with this hypoestrogenism. And here is the results. So at postmenopause, we have a less varied fundamental frequency contour. We took this from a phonetically balanced Spanish text that they needed to read. And what we see is that the way they finish their sentences is the F0 drops less at the end of the sentences. So instead of saying, hello, here I am, they will say, hello, here I am, kind of thing. So more monocordically speaking in this sense. And then this is an example of the diadochokinesis, the oral diadochokinesis that we've done, pataka, 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 without making mistakes. And you can see that with postmenopause, the oral diadochokinesis increased, which means that they are slower in repeating this syllable pattern. And also they are slower in getting correct diadochokinesis, but here what we are plotting is the maximum ability to repeat he. And what you see here is that when you do a aspirated H, the vocal folds are open. And then when you do the vowel, they close together. So it's like the ability of the abducting and adducting the vocal folds, which is neuromotor control of the larynx. Also, the speech rate and the articulation rate were slower in postmenopausal women. When we do a binary regression analysis, we can actually predict 82% of our postmenopausal cases by just maximum laryngeal diacokinesis together with the articulation rate. So this gives us actually an idea that menopause really seems to trigger a slight neuromotor decline as to what concerns the segmental and suprasegmental control of parameters of speech. But menopause also affects the respiratory subsystem. There are reports of a decline in lung function in postmenopausal women, and I think this will have some importance to wind instrumentalists. And also the rate of lung function decline is higher in postmenopausal women. We can see here the result of a meta-analysis of women in several countries, UK, Switzerland, Norway, and these were measures based on forced respiratory volume and forced vital capacity. And also, there is an increase in respiratory symptoms in menopausal women. As you can see here, this is also the result of a meta-analysis including data from many countries. So after more than 6 months of amenorrhea, you start to have more respiratory symptoms related to that. The good news is that it seems that hormonal replacement therapy might reduce these effects in lung function. But once again, we need further research because there are different types of hormonal replacement therapy. And I would recommend to talk to your doctor to try and find hormonal replacement therapy that can have a hybrid progesterone because it's not derivative from testosterone. Let's put it this simple. I only have 5 minutes and I've prepared so many things, so let's try and see what shall I show. Well, I would like to show you the results of a questionnaire. We developed actually 2 validated scales for musicians. One for musicians, singers, but also for professional voice users, that means teachers and other people that rely on the quality of their voices to be able to work. But here I would like to show you the results of a scale that we validated for singers that maybe will be good to translate into Norwegian language and actually use it with choir singers and, in opera houses, there are opera choirs, and that actually assesses the self-efficacy of those singers towards a voice function in menopause. We designed this scale and we test this scale with the English language. We are now doing it for Spanish. But why did we want to assess self-efficacy? Because self-efficacy is very important to motivate people to achieve a goal. Also promotes hard working and also perseverance. And these are qualities that musicians are required to have. Self-efficacy, it's a good predictor of academic motivation, motor learning, that is something that musicians need, and successful music performance. And there was a large scope of literature on research on musician self-efficacy. For example, music practice, jazz improvisation, instrumental performance, expressive performance cues, and differences between university and conservatoire students. But there is no validated self-efficacy scales for neuromotor control of singing. So we wanted to do this, and why is that as well? Because if we look at singers, they are very poor self-judges. So they judge very accurately others, but themselves, no. Of course, we developed, the scale has 18 items, and it combines pitch with different controlling pitch in different loudness and breathing conditions. And why we chose pitch, loudness and breathing? Because they are crucial to voice function. It is very hard to sing a high note in pianissimo, for example. We involved 155 singers, and then what we compared was premenopausal with menopausal singers, and the validity of the scale showed us that the scale can be divided in three main dimensions, let's say, high range and transitions, middle range and low range. And we found that postmenopausal singers here with these slightly not darker but lighter green, you can see that they had lower self-efficacy for the singing high notes and transitions and middle range. And these are examples of the questions that we have in this scale. I can sustain a long phrase or note in tune in my higher range. I can easily glide from higher to lower range. Or for the middle range, I can sing in tune in my middle range. Or for the lower range, I can sing loudly in my lower range. So we have 18 questions around this combination. And this tells us that the more oriented the voice education is to the biology, the sex and the age of the singer, and I would say of the musician, the better the decisions and actions in music pedagogy and voice pedagogy specifically here will be. To wrap up and sum this, what will be the take-home message? That voice function fluctuates with variations in concentrations of sex hormones. Due to the complexity of the female's endocrine reproductive system, females are more prone to sex hormonal-induced voice fluctuations than males. Voice education and regular voice practice are key factors for developing coping strategies and also to prevent possible future voice injuries related to variations in sex hormones. And
we need the revision of healthy policies towards female professional voice users, such as the respect days we had in the 1974s that said if my voice was affected by my menstrual cycle, then I can refuse to singing that night and be substituted but be paid. We don't have that anymore these days, but perhaps we do need especially singers because their instrument is their body. And the lack of high-level solutions to cope with the challenges of menopause might draw singers to early retirement. And actually, we should look at these questions very deeply so that we can provide better working conditions to everybody. So this is my collaborators in the lab. We have students, we have a linguistics, medical gynecologist, speech language pathologist, psychologist, and we welcome to Madrid. If you come and visit, do drop me an email and I will show you around with pleasure. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Felipa, for such an in-depth overview of how menopause and hormonal fluctuation in general can affect, well, actually affect the vocal fold and also self-efficacy, so also the perceptual. I open now the floor for questions. Okay, I can start with. In one of the studies, you mentioned 53 singers. So this means that you have been working with a number of women and also taking blood samples. And in your experience as researchers and also based on what you've seen in the literature, how awareness there is about that? How much aware these singers, these musicians are about these issues?
I think that they are not very much aware of unless they have a problem. So menopause, in one of the slides I didn't show, is not that menopause is bad news to everybody, but there are a slightly number of women that is really bad news. So those who go through menopause and don't feel so many changes, they will come up and go around the changes that they feel. But there are some that really lose their voices and they don't know why. And menopause affects so many aspects of a female lifestyle that, for example, it might not be that because it affects the voice itself, but by the fact that it affects the sleeping quality or the memory. Then it's like a snowball, because if you don't sleep, you cannot recover. If you don't recover, and then you have memory, and then you have concert, you have to sing by heart, what will you do? And people are not very much aware. Once again, I apologize if this shocks you, but I think the biology of female and males is very different. And although we want equality, and I think we should have equality in our rights, we are very different to begin with. And if we don't take that into consideration, we cannot move forward to get equality. That's my vision. Thank you.
Following up this line, so it's a physiological aspect of our female body, and this is impacting negatively the singers, but also a lot of other musicians. I've been talking with several orchestra members in the last 5 years, and they've been talking with me about I was testing a new birth control pill. I was working. My head was all over the place. I did a very bad job. I had to apologize. I had to apologize.
Yes.
I was like, you had to apologize?
Yeah, because it is lack of policy that, as I said, that brings equality to the working environment. Many women complain about, even non-musicians, of symptoms affecting at work. And nowadays, for example, in the south of Europe, we have these reproductive laws that protect women the menstrual cycle, because there was even a study with men that were inflicted with the menstrual cramps. And they could not cope with that. Because the coping level of pain is different between females and males. So it's very interesting, because females have more pain, as Aaron showed us, but actually they can, take the pain more than males. So if they do complain of more pain, it's because it's really more pain. You see what I mean? So, there are already reproductive laws about the menstrual cycle, but about menopause, nobody cares. And actually, I think we should, because you cannot be expected to work for this transitional period, at least. I would say that then you cope, and then you find the strategies, and you get back into the business. But into that transition, if you are a freelancer and you having these problems, you cannot say no. But and you should not apologize, because it's a natural thing. As I said, 40% of our lifetime is spent after menopause. And in the first years after menopause, we still feel some symptoms of menopausal transition. So I think we have a huge path to run for this gender equality, because we really need to not to apologize, because it's there, it happens, and there's nothing you can do about it, because it happens.
And there are initiatives. This is one of that that are aiming to a large awareness. But last week at the Trinity Laban, a fantastic conference on women's in music, women's work in music, and the majority of the scholars and professionals were women. I'm looking at the audience here. It's better. It's encouraging. But what can we do? What can we do to, in the longer run, we want to help women, but what can we do now?
Well, I think what Aaron was talking about, collective guidelines and collective force. I mean, if you look at the history of working conditions, females had to fight a lot for their rights, but it was the collectiveness that made them that made the big changes. So this initiative of healthy conservatoires, for example, I think could be a way to go forward. To bring more this, I wouldn't say gender sensitivity, sex sensitivity, kind of, well, it's related, but to bring these questions into the table is not just the working hours, the awareness, it's a bunch of things and laws, and nowadays countries tend to follow each other in the laws. So maybe by changing the law in one country, we'll trigger others to do equally. So, and the UK is so well organized with this. Maybe you will be a force to change the policies of females' working conditions in music. I mean, I can only talk by a singer's perspective because I'm not an orchestra musician. But there's cases in the literature, reports of pianists, like saying that I do more errors when my menstrual cycle is about to come. So things are there, or maybe engage like a big star in the world of music to speak freely about this and to move forward. I mean, I don't know, I really don't know, but we really need to change because art and well-being are intertwined, and we cannot promote well-being to others if our own well-being as musicians is not there. And it's not just about how we face well-being, it's actually also how the body allows us to be feeling well-being. So.
And the last question.
Oh my God.
What about research? Where should we look into? What are the gaps?
I think brain research really needs to take into consideration hormones and performance. So neuromotor performance in the brain, we are very interested to look at how things work, but maybe now we need to look at also changing conditions or observing how these cyclical variations or the menopause affect neuromotor control of musicians. I would really, really love that brain researchers in music will take into account more how the hormones may change the way the system is wired. I don't know if you know about this.
Just a quick question. Do you think there's... to what extent is there scope in looking specifically at how performers respond under situations of stress and how this can mediate that response? Because I don't really know anything in the literature that's engaged with that at all.
No.
But you're talking about release of cortisol and other stress hormones, and you can imagine that there's a tremendous amount to be understood in terms of how stress is affecting the body in those circumstances.
Yeah, I don't know about literature on that, on musicians. I know that there are some, for example, not related to cortisol and stress, but related to ovarian function. I know that there are studies with rats and how they vocalize when you impose fake menopause. But with humans, I've not come across how, for example, the brain of a postmenopausal singer works as compared with pre or her passing through, or even with the menstrual cycle. There's no literature on that, no way. And of course the brain will change because the hormones are not just the cortisol, but the other ones. Because the responses are, they are all steroid hormones, so they are related for sure.
Any other questions?
Hi, and thank you. This is very interesting. But you went so quickly through it, so I think I kind of lost something. So I kind of want to go back a little bit. What I was wondering about was you were talking, when you talked about menstruation, but also when you came to the menopause, you talked about hormones, people taking contraceptives or hormonal
replacement
treatments.
therapy, yes.
And I kind of lost you if that infected the musician positively or negatively.
Well, that's the thing. There are studies showing that affects positively, and there are others that show that is negative. And then you look at the preparations of hormonal replacement therapy, and some are something and something. So you need studies well designed with the same type of, starting with one at least, and see how that affects. Because the results are controversial. Okay. And always, because there is a risk of breast cancer, ovarian cancer, of taking hormonal replacement therapy, well, at least some of them, not all of them, but the risk is there, so you really need to assess that interdisciplinarily. So I could say, oh, it's good for you, but I'm not a physician. No. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how you are built genetically your history. So you always need to counterbalance this. Is this really helping me more than giving me some other effects? Or so we are still not there.
No, okay. So, but you haven't seen that if women are more like in a neutral place and not like this.
Well, the literature tells us that if you take hormonal replacement therapy in the beginning of this menopausal transition for a small period of time, then, for example, your cognition, your brain function, it's not going down. So you are better there. And then you stop it and you are fine. That's what some literature shows you, that if you take carefully with guidance for a small amount of period, it might help you indeed.
Okay. Okay. Kind of difference then between musicians and women in general?
Is women in general. I'm talking about women in general.
Okay.
In singers, there are studies showing that, for example, no, in singers there are no studies. It's always in women in general. Actually, this was the first study that only took singers.
Yeah.
Well, we also took others, but this data was singers.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I had a bit the same, that I didn't catch everything. So you said something about the auditory accuracy and intonation, and I also didn't get really how did the contraception, for example...
Because when you don't take an oral contraceptive pill and you sing at the follicular phase of the cycle, for example, you might do certain things because you are expecting that your body changes, so you have to overcome. When you take the oral contraceptive pill, you don't feel that need, so you relax, and therefore you are not in the pitch as you should. So this feedback loop about what you need and what you hear is kind of different.
Okay, so it's actually about the bodily, what you
hear about yourself,
and not so much about. So if you were an instrumentalist, that would be different, do you think?
That I cannot say, no, because I didn't study instrumentalists. But yeah, that I cannot say. I don't dare to say anything because I don't know. Yeah, but there is a lot of medication affecting performance. Actually, in Musical Excellence, a book produced, edited by Aaron Willeman, there is a chapter on how medication affects musicians. So maybe you should have a look at that. Because, for example, if you are a singer, taking Inderal, if you get Inderal is like a beta blocker. If you are a wind instrumentalist, it dries out the mucosas, and therefore you feel everything very dry and might not be good for you to take before you go to stage. So there's lots of things going on, but specifically about hormonal replacement therapy, no.
Thank you, Philippa.
My pleasure.
For this amazing opportunity that we had to listen to how menopause can affect women's voice. And thank you again.
Thank you.
And let's have a 15 minutes break, and then we go back with the next speaker. Thank you. I am deeply honored to introduce the next guest speaker, Dr. Ragnhild Bang-Nay. She's an associate professor at the Department of Psychology at the University of Oslo and the lead of the Wellbeing research at the Norwegian Institute of Public Health, where well-being is a strategic priority. She's also coordinating intervention research at the Prominent Research Center at UIO. And her research encompasses the study of well-being, mental health, personality, resilience, and the interplay between genetic and environmental influences. She's particularly interested in the causal influences unfolding over time and how to facilitate good health and well-being in individuals and populations. She collaborates closely with ministries, governmental agencies, county councils, municipalities, and NGOs in the health and policy sector in Norway and abroad. The title of her talk is Glimmers of Happiness Research. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ragnhild Neg.
That was a very sort of yeah, I feel like a very odd child in this community or this context, because I don't sing and I don't play anything, at least not anymore. I had so much, performance anxiety as a child, so my worst childhood memories are still from, performing in these children's events, on the piano. And I don't really know much about musicians' well-being, but I have been working with well-being research and monitoring for the last 22 years. Today, actually. I started well-being research the 1st of September 2003 in the Public Health Institute. So I did most of my work in the first few years in genetic epidemiology. So we've been looking into genetic and environmental factors, and then more and more public health. So we are working mostly in monitoring the population and municipalities and groups. We are doing causal genetically informative research, and then also more and more interventions. And often I have been called sort of a happiness researcher, and then I think I'm a resilience researcher, because I'm mostly interested in what makes people, find life okay, or sometimes, really enjoy it too. But it's challenging to be a human. We've heard about menopause, and it's a lot of other things too that can sort of be complicated. So I said I'm not really playing anything, and I am not also really familiar with musicians' well-being. But coming here today, I thought I'd take you through my weekend, because I was probably thinking more about musicians and music over the weekend than I would otherwise have been if I was not coming here. So I started on Friday with a doctoral defense, and coming here today, I just had a meeting with Heidi Umbach Hansen, who defended her thesis on musical sensibility and motivation for music use using twin research. Because I hired her in a project we are running on mothers' well-being, or the women's well-being. And on Friday we were talking about, thank God we are not professional musicians, because, we have such performance anxiety, both of us, And she was so happy after her defense, because, even that, she was not singing her defense, but still that was quite a challenge. So I don't know if it's because we are women. From how it is with male musicians, but from puberty, twice as many women or girls have anxiety and depressive symptoms, and it goes through the rest of life. Yeah, probably something to do with our reproductive role. So I left the defense, and then I went to this festival in Sandvika, a local town. And they had a lot of concerts, so we were amateurs playing, and they were really happy and satisfied. And I was thinking, okay, that's probably much nicer and better to be amateur musician than being a professional. So it was nice, and then when it was finished, it was dark, and it was rainy, so I ran to the train, and it was quite full, but I spotted this seat in the corner of the train, and I was literally crawling on top of this guy to get sort of a corner seat. Never met him before, but we started talking. It was 5 minutes to my station at Asker. And later on, I looked up he's a trumpetist, and it's also a Philharmonic orchestra, and it says it's in Norwegian, but he says, I'm looking forward to every single day at work. Like, fantastic colleagues. And it's fantastic. I almost had to pinch my arm, that this has come true. He wasn't so satisfied in the train I didn't ask him about well-being, but he said, he was coming from a concert, Mahler 7. No, he wasn't really into Mahler 7. And actually, it was not so many people in the audience. The day before had been full, but not today. So that's probably something that can influence your well-being. So moving through my weekend, I also met these guys who had met up to play together on these really old instruments. So it's 7 guys, only guys, yeah? And they seemed to be really happy and enjoying themselves. One had recently retired, I think, and the rest were still professional musicians. And I asked them, when we measure well-being, we tend to use a 0 to 10-point scale, how satisfied they were with, being a musician. I had chosen this professional musician life. Really, they were super satisfied. 8, 9, 10, yeah. So they were very, very satisfied. And I asked, but would you, what about other type of work? One of them said, his wife she was not a musician, and it wasn't very tempting. So, they were very happy about that. Amateurs, how do you think it is to be a professional musician as compared to being an amateur? And they said, we have never been amateurs, so we don't know. And then I asked about, gender. Are there any sort of gender topics or barriers or anything relevant in terms of gender and your work? And they said, no. It's so interesting. It's when is not gender an issue? An interesting topic. There's 7 guys with grey hair, and they said no. And we've just heard about all this sort of biology and hormones, and then we have all these other things like norms, and it's so many things. So that was quite interesting. Attitudes and facts is always interesting. So that was my weekend. I will come back to some of the topics afterwards. So in the well-being field, it's been a sort of massive development over the past couple of decades. So these are a number of international publications with well-being in the title. And if we were today, it was probably, I haven't checked, but probably up here. And well-being has, become a popular topic in magazines and books, but also with their own journals. And also the topic has found its way into these most renowned medical journals. It's a sustainable development goal, most notably number 3, but well-being is relevant for all of them. We measure well-being. Every March, the World Happiness Report is published, ranking countries all over the world, or at least 160 countries more or less, on how well their population is, doing. And in 2022, when the editors and the report looked back over the last decade, what has happened the last decade with well-being measurements? And they pointed out 3 sort of conclusions, and that was that politicians around the world are increasingly see happiness or well-being as an overriding goal for policy, that we can measure well-being, and that we now know a lot more about what causes it. And clearly that makes us, able to facilitate good lives for individuals, communities, workplaces, nations. And I think today about at least 70% of OECD countries have developed framework for measuring well-being to be used as sort of a policy steering tools for prioritization and to decide on how to work on well-being in their communities and nations. And Norway, actually, I don't know if you know, but starting in 2021, when the Prime Minister announced that we are working towards a national strategy, it was just recently published. So it's a national well-being strategy, which will be followed by an action plan starting this autumn, working towards, good quality of life or good high well-being, but also even distribution, because we have a very skewed distribution. Although Norwegians tend to score high on well-being measures, we have a number of people. I mean, up to 20-30% in some groups reporting low well-being, and particularly among unemployed, maybe musicians, I don't know, and people struggling with mental health issues and not integrated in meaningful activities or studies. We see that the proportion is about 50% or even more. So it's sort of drawing a picture of this policy based on science of well-being. Obviously because, partly at least, because well-being is something we all want. I mean, it's a value we share, but also that it's something that, most people think policy should be about. It's something that unites us, and maybe it can also contribute to better communication between governments and people, population, and that well-being also can contribute to more, constructive collaboration or co-development in terms of health. How to create a good public health, for example. We need to collaborate across sectors, across groups, across ministries and departments. So well-being as a concept is sort of not discipline-specific or ministry-specific. It's something we all care about. So the word itself and as a vision will sort of potentially facilitate that collaboration. So it's a value, but it's also something that well-being is also associated with a lot of benefits. I mean, it's not only an outcome, but also a drive, yeah? So when we feel well, when we have meaning in life, when we experience positive emotions, we are more productive, we are more creative, we are more curious, we develop faster. We are, people tend to have better health behavior, run more, eat healthier, smoke less. It prevents mental illness. So better mental health and also better somatic health, like immune system functioning, for example, or cardiovascular problems. You're less at risk of developing a stroke, for example. And not surprisingly, also people who are, experience higher well-being also live longer. And it's been studied in a lot of different designs. This is just one example where, those with high well-being had 5.4% extra life or longevity, 4.4 years in this study. And why is it like this? Why do we see these associations?
Connection with physical activity?
Yeah, probably. Or, there's probably a lot of different mechanisms, that through health behaviors, people selecting themselves into positive or healthy lifestyles. But also, potentially, that's, well-being, positive emotion works as an antidote to stress, for example. So, these different hormones and signal what do you call it? Neurotransmitters that we are secreting when we are in a good mood, they will have an anti-stress effect. They will inhibit cortisol. It will raise the pain threshold, promote healing. So there's a lot of benefits physiological and neurochemical benefits of positive emotion. So if you bounce back from stress or challenges faster and better, of course, it will be much less tear and wear on the body through a long life. Yeah. So if you have positive emotions or experience well-being, it will be much less stress for the body over time. This is sort of known from the field of psychoneuroendocrinoimmunology, or the world's longest name. Eh? So, what makes us happy, or what creates well-being?
Doing what we love. Doing what we love.
Yeah, that's probably super important. Yeah. Yeah.
Good social interactions.
Yeah. In the UK, they published the 50 sort of main sources of happiness in, I think, in an Independent some years ago. It was based on 4,000 or 5,000 people. And you know what was, on top of that list?
Champagne.
Yeah, it was pretty close. It was, going to bed in fresh white linen, it's quite nice. And also, second was, to feel the sun warm your face, which is super nice, huh? Especially after a long Norwegian winter. Quite high up on, or British winter, quite high up on that list was also, when you've eaten too much, and you can just get rid of, tight clothes, so when you get rid of something uncomfortable, yeah? So a lot of these sources of happiness on that list were sort of these pleasures, like, the smell of, freshly brewed coffee or sweet cake or, pleasures. And I tended not to be so interested in these pleasures. I don't really like cake so much. But they have true health benefits. I mean, they make us relax, lower our shoulders. They, create sort of glimmers or moments of joy, and sometimes really heavy workloads or long, challenging days. So they are important and have real health benefits. But they are sort of used up as we are experiencing them. So if we have to eat the entire cake, it's sort of not so nice anymore. It's sort of sickening almost. So well-being is probably about much more than that. But even in the ancient time, a lot of the philosophers would look at, and cherish the pleasures, like Aristippus, for example, women, sex, champagne, if they had. But, the ancient philosophers, maybe, probably those who worked the deepest and longest hours on, reflecting on a good life. And for most of them, well-being was not about pleasures. And well-being was sort of within the ethics department. It was about functioning well, about living according to virtues, living well and right, developing, realizing your potential. And in much of the well-being research I have been involved in, it's sort of focusing, although most research would probably focus most on the sort of well-being, pleasure, satisfaction part. More and more research are focusing on sort of the functioning well part, the developing, realizing your strengths and living well, functioning well. And I guess sometimes that doesn't feel so good. I mean, sometimes, it's, some of those, there's a lot of hard work, I mean, to become a professional musician, for example, and it brings so much joy when you reach, a new level or can play a new instrument or or concert. So happiness in life is not, as we are experiencing it, is sometimes very different from how you are thinking about it afterwards. So I don't know if you know this guy, Audun Hetland. He's a Norwegian researcher, and he did his PhD with a colleague of mine, and he was doing research into these, extreme sports people. So they were jumping off cliffs, they were, going down steep ski slopes, and then he interviewed them. Actually, he jumped after them. He didn't tell his supervisor, he jumped after and interviewed them as they were sort of coming down the slope or landing. And all these, his informants or the participants, they had these wearables registering facial muscles and emotions as you're experiencing them. So interestingly, when he was interviewing them, it was sort of the moments of their lives, there was, such joy, such, engagement, such happiness. But when you look at what they're experiencing as they are jumping or running down the slope, it's no happiness at all. It's focused, they are alert, they are concentrated, you can spot fear. So it's very different often during an activity than how you're experiencing something you have achieved afterwards. So I think already at Augustine's time, 300 after Christ, is that when he lived, there was about, 250 different definitions of well-being, and it's a messy field, and I'm not sure we have managed to clarify it, but we have, well-being and ill-being, and one of my colleagues, we were trying to make a super easy model. So we were thinking that a lot of about life is about something we are sort of drawn towards, something, positive emotion, or it's something we avoid, yeah? And then also something about stability and change. We want to develop, but we want to, relax and, restitute. So on this well-being side here, we, these are, in a way, positions, goal positions. We can be well-moving. We can be approaching goals. It's excitement, engagement. It could be about, practicing for a new concert. It could be about dating a new, person, or planning a holiday, or applying for a new job. So we are well-moving. Oops. Sorry about that. We're not supposed to have... So we are well-moving, so it's a goal state approaching, it's a potential gain. And then, of course, we can have reached our goal, We are well-staying. It's pleasurable. And then again, of course, we can be about to lose, The job is not coming about. The relationship is falling apart. The holiday needs to be cancelled. So we're ill-moving and then ill-staying, when we have finally lost, we're depressed. So we are thinking then about well-being as on this side. So it's extremely important to be well-moving and well-staying, But, any development probably necessitates some of these experiences. Yet, all of these are subjective in a way. So when we are measuring well-being in the population, and also in the rest of Europe or in the OECD, we're not looking at well-being only as a sort of subjective thing, but also as an objective one in a way. And in science, at least not in psychological science, you're not supposed to be normative, of course. But in the work we have been doing, and then when we also look at, objective factors for well-being, to some extent, we are normative. So this is how the Norwegian well-being strategy is focusing on well-being. So it is assuming in a way that some experiences are so important that they are it's needs. And they can be measured as subjective or objective, so it's about freedom, autonomy, safety, It's about, subjective experiences. It's about learning and development, belonging and community, relations. We are, social animals. And then about health. And then also focusing on fairness and distribution. So in this context, we think about well-being also, encompassing also conditions, objective factors. I asked these guys, the gray-haired men with the old instruments, about their well-being and what was so good then about being a musician. And they said, all of them, it's about the well-moving. It's about learning, development, being curious, purpose, autonomy. One of them said, in the opera where I've been working, it's sort of not that much choice, But then we can have a sort of, we can have make a concert or something between us, so that it's fine, But they mostly spoke about this well-moving purpose. And also doing something they had been doing their entire life, so it was sort of a continuation of, development. So one guy said, I never really decided. I just went on a train and it kept moving. And here I am. But then they pointed out some of the, sort of more negative aspects, of course, as well. And it's mostly in the ill-moving, when you can't keep up. When it's really difficult, when you're not sort of matching to the, potential or your vision of how you would, or you sort of, you're not playing well enough, actually. So about the ill-moving, and of course about performance anxieties. All of us have been, experiencing phobic reactions, and just going into the sort of concert place. About, never being off work in a way. You go for a weekend, but, it's sort of, what do you call färskvara in English? You need to practice all the time, and you get bad conscience when you're sort of not doing that. And then, of course, the beta blockers, the medicines to sort of keep calm and carry on. And like you talked about before, of course, the musculoskeletal problems. So I got a bit curious, and you probably know all about this because you have been doing a lot of research into musicians. I know mostly about, the Norwegian population, the world population, women and men, or different age groups. So how are musicians doing? And I was looking particularly into what I could find of Norwegian and Scandinavian studies. So this one, do you know that study? Yeah. Showing clearly that, the level of psychological distress, anxiety, and depressive problems are much, much higher in musicians, particularly in solo player, keyboard type musicians, than in the regular workforce. And the amount of psychotropic drugs or analgesics or painkillers, a lot higher among the students. So this was a study by one of my colleagues, and they were looking at the shot-to-student data. And here I've just made a graph, but I mean, this is odds ratio. So one is sort of the regular student, and then you see the musical students, higher in mental disorders, this self-reported anxiety and depressive symptoms, not in self-reported depression diagnosis, and in psychotherapy, use of psychotherapy. But actually, seems to be more of a problem in sort of the performing arts faculty and also the arts faculty. So what about women? Do you know much more about that? I looked at this report because it also shows some well-being. They've used some of the same measures as we do in our population-based surveys. And you did find that there was no difference, yeah? In the web, that was the WebWebs.
Yeah, that's right.
So in this Danish one, I think it was almost On this 0 to 10 scale, almost 1 point lower among at least female musicians.
Yeah, that's one.
Yeah. So the proportion of both males and females thriving is certainly lower than in the general population. And clearly there's a gender difference and also a major difference to the population at large, yeah? And then, of course, there's a lot of challenges faced mostly by women musicians, like the structural inequality, pay differences, recognition gaps, and access to professional development possibilities, cultural pressures, self-modesty norms, the well-being here was mostly anxiety reported, but I mean, that's 65% in some studies report anxiety symptoms. In the population, Norwegian population, it's about 14% now. Somewhat higher for women, but it's a major difference. More depression and performance anxiety, musculoskeletal problems, and you talked about all these. And then it seems also that amateurs are potentially more, they benefit more from music making than professionals. So in this Danish study, some years back, so it's about almost 10-year-old study, and you probably know it, but the active musicians, so in terms of, the answers by these 7 guys with the old instruments, seems to be a lot more. It's quite valuable to just be an amateur musician. And then, of course, the work environment. So this indicates, the former indicates that could be something about the environment, obviously. And I'll speed through it because it's 5 minutes. So this study shows that there are a lot of different aspects of the work environment. Musicians in this study, based on about 8,000 Norwegians, but only 808 musicians, found that musicians, reported more control, but felt less supported and acknowledged, more work-family conflicts, less motivated, perceived their work as more demanding. And then particularly classical and contemporary musicians, they reported less favorable psychosocial environment. And orchestral players felt less control and soloists less support. So it's clearly something about the environment. And what makes people thrive usually? I'll speed through it. But this is a Norwegian representative sample that we've been asking, what is important for your well-being? And the results align with results from other nations, probably Brits and Americans, and maybe even people from China. This family and friends. As a relations are extremely important. Health, safety. It's impossible to feel well if you are scared all the time or worry about raising your concerns. Freedom to choose, to have autonomy, and then economy and have a safety perhaps. So, and much less, sex and soma and, social media and politics are not. This could probably be different in other countries. So quite similar, what people report, quite similar to the way we have conceptualized well-being in Norway. In the work sphere, I was listening a couple of years ago to Jan Emanuel Deneve at the Oxford Wellbeing Institute, and he was talking about what employees actually, what are the drivers of employee happiness and what we think are the drivers. Like here's some compensation, flexibility, and then what actually drives well-being at work, which is, mostly relations, belonging, support, inclusion, meaning. So mostly about social relations. And when we ask people in our national surveys, we do find that context matters a lot. These are national representative data from Norway, and there's two factors that seem to be particularly important for well-being in Norway. Experiencing giving and supporting relations, and not experiencing discrimination. So inclusion, exclusion. And I think we see that in most places. Another factor is, of course, safety, trygghet. Safety. So this environmental scan from the Netherlands also show that socioeconomy and safety. Safety, it's impossible to be well if you're scared. And then psychological safety at work is an extremely important factor, of course, that you can voice your concern, that you can feel trust, and you can sort of speak up, not being worried about feeling humiliated, which is sometimes, complicated with these hierarchical structured workplaces. For example, in some musician contexts, and it depends quite a lot on what type of leadership. So if you have a very authoritarian leadership, that really harms psychological safety. If you have a more sort of inclusive, or even women leaders in this context, or not necessarily musical context, but seems to create more psychological safety. And it's not because they're women, but their style. Yeah? Is it last minute? Cool. There's a lot of things we can do to have better lives or more well-being in our lives, and we can work on the structural level. I think that's extremely important, to work on sort of the organizations, the nations, the laws, how we, tax system for that matter, that we work with the structures. We have been working quite a lot the last few years with, maybe some of you know it, the 5 Ways to Wellbeing. It was made for UK government in 2008. What are sort of the equivalent of 5 a day for somatic health, for well-being and mental health? And they're all activities. So it's sort of to be, thought of as sort of a toolbox for keeping sane and happy. And it was to be activities or topics that would be useful for everyone. Because we are different. We have some genetics, we have some personalities and preferences, but some topics are relevant for most people, maybe because they address basic shared human needs. And these were, again, connect. We've been talking about connection. Being active, physically active particularly, taking notice, to be present, and then to keep learning. Keep learning, and then also to contribute to others. So these are all activities and relevant for people of all ages and personalities. We've been doing a lot of research into these. I think they can be incorporated into the structures. We've been using them in the public health profiles or barometers to all Norwegian municipalities and counties as sort of, ideas for how they can work on the structures, and creating nicer, architectural cities, or work on the services and nature and green areas. But we have also been testing these in interventions, because we are interested in, of course, the causality, So Monica, who is here, she has tested this in a large randomized controlled trial in Norway. It's people of all sort of ages, and they are not particular risk groups. We have been providing them with 2 webinars and then 10 text messages. Super cheap intervention. And then we do find very positive effects. We do find that those who are receiving the intervention, they have 2 webinars and then they start practicing. They become happier, or experience more joy and satisfaction, and it relates to how many activities they are doing. And it seems that the activities are actually working like, I don't know if you know the Broaden and build theory, but it's about, positive emotion instead of negative emotion, which shuts us down in a way, and it opens, it broadens our perspective, our attention. And by doing so, we build resources and become happier and better off in terms of well-being. So it actually broadens and builds over time, and that's exactly what we find. We find that doing these kind of activities, fitting them into everyday life, creates more positive emotions, and over time it builds satisfaction and life satisfaction, and also flourishing, like you're sort of measuring in your study with the Web's scale. So it works like this, and we also see that this tiny intervention, I mean, it's a digital, small intervention. It seems to last over time, yeah? So this is after 6 months. No, 12 months, sorry. So we think this is sort of a multi-purpose or trans-diagnostic way of dealing with stress, and, potentially useful for orchestras or municipalities or people, individual groups, which can at least make more glimmers of happiness for most people. I think I'm a bit over time, but sorry about that.
Thank you so much. It's been an incredible journey through the general population, and going through then also meeting our music world. So it's an incredible journey. I'm sure that we have lots of questions. In the interest of time, I would suggest that we start a panel discussion so we can address questions to you and also address the same questions to the others. Would be okay? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so perhaps the panel members? Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you can move the chairs here. Okay, wonderful. As you can see, we actually we have a big panel. We have two more persons in the panel. One is Claire Fair from Cork Orchestra here in Oslo, and Stacey Dixon from the Stavanger Symphony Orchestra. And it's a great pleasure to have all of you here from the academics through the orchestra players, and Alexander, which directs everything on top of it. So, I had a question for you, actually, which can then go, I can open up. So I was very happy the way you concluded after so many depressing things that we have discussed. You actually talk about an intervention and how that can help. Now, I'm talking from the perspectives of the orchestra musicians. Those people, they work so much hard. They schedule, it's full up of, they can have 5 concerts in a week, 2 rehearsals, teaching on the 6th day, and they might have 1 day off. Their day off is not a non-working day, because they have to study and practice for the next concert weeks. And their concert weeks, the program might be totally different than the previous week. So, you mentioned how important it could be to increase the number of activities. Can you say a bit more of that? How can that can be squeezed in their life?
Yeah, because I mean, I tend to maybe not have so many concerts, but I mean, a lot of us have quite busy lives, I think, and that's, you know, activities, you know, it's something we really want to reduce maybe, but some of them, you know, taking notice, being present. I mean, some of these are really, they are sustainable, they are close at hand, you know, they are restitution, they are about restitution, you know, and, you know, just looking outside the window. I mean, I think just a few moments of beauty or relaxation or being totally involved in a conversation, listening to music or avoiding music. Maybe, you know, what's it called, the play that's just silence, 4 minutes of silence? Yeah, John Cage. Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's. But I think also, you know, we need to be physically active. So I mean, it's possible to walk to work and fit in micro exercises. To live longer, you need to practice, you know, a lot of physical activity maybe to really boost your life expectancy with 5 years. But to change your mood might take less than 10 minutes. So it's been quite a lot of research doing that. You can dance while you're cooking lasagna, you know, or do some yoga in the sitting room. You can walk around the corner. So sometimes, you know, it doesn't take a lot of effort and time. And then I think, to be honest, I think well-being is about activity. Sorry about that. But even the ancient philosophers were thinking of well-being not as a sort of prize from being active, you know, something that you gain from, but being active. So it was extended activity, I mean dynamic activity extended in time, yeah? So I think it's a lot we can do even though we are busy, and maybe we actually need to take ourselves out of the activities we are mostly doing and take notice. And, you know, even learning doesn't need to be something that's really strenuous or I mean, we can change how we cook a soup, you know, or, you know, you don't need to learn a new language. Perhaps just, you know, find out how flies are breathing. I don't know.
That's great. But what practices do you normally implement to maintain your mental and physical health?
Well, first I'd like to say that I'm quite involved in building the new NRK building, and we have asked for a window because we don't get to look out of the window. And in Norway, it's dark when we come to work, and it's dark when we leave work, and in the between, we don't look out of the window. But hopefully, in 5 years. For me, it's to do with balance. I'm I practice at work, so that once I leave work, I'm free. I love walking in the forest and going on my bike. But also for me, it's really important that my social activity is at work, and that I'm happy with my colleagues, and that also gives me a lot of joy. And that they don't make me have meetings in all my breaks, so that I can actually have social interactions in my breaks, and just generally trying to be the best I can at what I do, because that also gives joy. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd second pretty much everything you said. I find I can walk to work, and I've never been able to walk. Well, actually, I could in New Zealand, but having this situation where I can take the morning walking around the harbour to the job is wonderful. Like Claire, I try to leave my oboe at work, so I practice at work and don't take it home. I have to make reeds, obviously, so a lot of that happens at home. But I think I've found a bit more strength in my day-to-day existence by varying activities. I think during the pandemic, where suddenly we weren't able to work we were very lucky that it was only a few weeks that we weren't back at work, and then we started up with some small group activities. But first of all, there was a few weeks where we just had time to just rediscover the instrument, actually. I didn't practice for a week or two, and then I was, actually, no, I want to get back into this. And I started learning new things, going back through some of my old books and learning a couple of new pieces. I got a hobby in that summer, which is chasing bumblebees. I now know probably more than many people about bumblebees in Norway. Obviously, there are plenty of experts who know 100 times as much as me, but and I combined that with another one of my previous hobbies, which is photography. So I was chasing bumblebees and taking photos of them. And that was a real mindfulness activity that really had me just in the moment and not thinking too much about the stress or the stresses of the job, because our job is very stressful. We have to deliver at the time that someone says. We can't take 10 seconds to be ready to. It has to happen when it happens. And yeah, it's. I think we're very good at handling all these little decisions that have to happen so that something happens at the moment. But that is a stressful thing to do. So I think a bit of balance in every day is vital, actually. Yeah.
Perspective of research.
Yeah, well, one of the interesting things here is that this workshop, I guess, and all of this, the reason we're sitting here, started from our empirical work, which is basic research, you could say, and trying to understand more about what's going on. And when we music, to use that term, to music, where you can think of this both as the performers but the perceivers, but how we come together. And as I mentioned in the introduction at Ritmo, we have been working with studying both musicians but also people that perceive music in different ways, in the lab, outside of the lab, etc. Not with a particular focus on mental health and well-being, but it's interesting how that has kind of surfaced as a topic in many of our discussions. And what is also, I think, is interesting, even for those of us that have been researching musicians, and I'm particularly into embodied musicking and then embodied research, embodied cognition, trying to understand how the body works in musical contexts, more from a kind of perhaps fundamental kind of biomechanical perspective, how you actually move your fingers and your body and these type of things. But then it's still interesting how we can think so mechanically about that and not really consider how it impacts the whole person, both physically and psychologically. And I think this is something that has become more and more important, and I think it's something we need to talk more about. It's something we need to research on as well and integrate it more properly into the research that we are doing, because a lot of the music psychology research is not very much about psychology. It's really, or technically speaking, I guess it is, but it's quite far from the practicalities of it. And this is something to bring into it, and particularly also when we are sitting in this department now, and this morning I was teaching a group of bachelor students, and the students in this department studying our musicology program, they are not becoming musicians, or most of them at least are not, and that's not what we're teaching them either, but they will end up as teachers, and they are going to work as music administrators and write about music and know about and talk about music, etc. And their knowledge about the topics that we are talking about today, I think, is close to zero. which I find highly problematic. I think this is something that we, well, the answer is always that we need more research, of course, and I think we do. And I think now, also based on what we're discussing now, I mean, at least that's what we are going to try to do here, is to try to do more research on this topic. But it's important to figure out exactly what are we going to research. Where are we going to dig in? Because there are so many different perspectives, and it's been such an interesting kind of afternoon here, hearing the 3 different talks. I mean, with so different approaches, but still very, very important approaches. So I don't have any answers now, but I think it's really important that we bring this up to the surface and that we try to dig in. And I think that's, as several of you have mentioned, I think longitudinal studies, I think, is key here. And I think at least for those of us working in institutions where we do have a little bit of muscular power, you could say, in terms of either being a conservatory or a university or an orchestra for that matter, where we have the ability to perhaps engage in data collection over time and then try to do something, I think it's our responsibility somehow to lift this and figure out ways of doing it. So, and then I think collaboration is key. Really, so that's why it's been such a joy to work with the orchestras. I mean, it's to start a collaboration, but we have really just started scratching the surface. There's so much to do, so we need to kind of really figure out, okay, how can we actually take this further? How can we do? And it's very inspiring to hear about you. Well, you're working at the national scale, but I think we can learn a lot from kind of the work that you are doing, in terms of how can we also, even in smaller scale, but still have a more systematic approach to how we can get about it. Yeah, that wasn't really an answer, but it's more a reflection.
So I'll just, in relation to one area of research and the intersection with well-being, we've taken an interest in looking at the role of music and music making within society. So what does it bring to the general public? And we see that there are tremendous benefits here. So, this works on a couple of levels. So we looked at data collected through the English longitudinal study of aging, which is a large epidemiological study with tens of thousands of people. And we see that those older adults who are more engaged with the arts, who go to museums, go to concerts, they have, in effect, lower levels of depression and anxiety over time. But it's not just about getting rid of the bad things, it also enhances their well-being scores as well. But the other thing that we found in that is that it's not just, I mean, you do get benefit in later life by just engaging with the arts, but if you do it in a sustained fashion throughout your life, the benefits are really magnified. So there's a lot there to understand. I think it's important for music institutions to be on top of that research, to understand where we're making that contribution to society. But the other element is that within conservatoires, what we've tried to do at the Royal College of Music is to introduce courses where our students are trained to go into community context or health context to provide music making with people in those settings. So what that does for us is it gets our students to stop obsessing about getting on stage at the Wigmore Hall, because that's all they want to do, but to think about who are the people I'm having the most impact on, how does it make a difference in their lives, and then therefore how does it make a difference in the musician's own life. So it's a bit of a mutual benefit there. I'll stop there.
I think that it also helps if we start educating musicians to that broad perspective of what kind of role music can have in societies. You being talking about being active. We can be active as musicians, not only on stage, but on promoting well-being in pregnant women through singing interventions, because it's good for the mothers and for the unborn baby. Music therapy, of course, nursery, places. So I think our role as musicians in the society can be much bigger for improving the well-being of others and with that of our own.
Can I add one other thing? So we work a lot with these 5 ways to well-being, and so when we do our own intervention studies with musicians out in community contexts, and we look what mental health service users or mothers with postnatal depression or older adults, what they receive in terms of the active music-making interventions, we see that they tick all of those 5 ways. The music intervention really covers the full gamut of those 5 ways to well-being. So one way to well-being is to make music.
Actually, going back to the way we started these answers, you were talking about what you do to balance. I must say that I sing. I sing. The way of getting my balance in my life is to be singing.
I just had to add one thing there because I've been known now as Professor Standstill because I've been doing standstill practice for 15 years now, and I just completed a book manuscript also called Still Standing. So my hidden secret is to stand still for 10 minutes in the middle of the day every day. And actually, this started as an artistic research project, and I also used it in performance. But it's also kind of a way of enjoying something. So that's that's also something to do. If you feel that your head is too full of music, then standing still for 10 minutes in silence is a good thing. And we are organizing a stillness workshop actually here in October. If anybody is interested in that. Anyways, I'll stop there.
So it does seem that the academics here have some clear idea of where they want to go. Talk about longitudinal studies, music as society, and well-being. But what do you think about that? Because in the end, we want to make a life better for everybody, including musicians. So, from a perspective of an orchestra member, what do you think about all this discussion? So how can we make sure that a longitudinal study is really what you need? Where
First, I'm just thinking. I think one thing that I personally feel a little bit of stress about is that often as musicians we have to constantly argue for the value of what we do, like in the world. Every year there's someone who wants to say, this is not important, the arts are the thing that we get rid of. This is exactly what seems to be happening at the moment in Norway and many other countries. So I would really love to see, to not feel that was just my responsibility, because it's sometimes how it feels, because it is so important. There's so many studies, that prove a connection between well-being and music, increased aptitude at mathematics, languages, perception, in the health industry to do with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and things like that. I don't quite know where I'm finishing up here, but I think all these things are just so valuable, and we understand the worth of it because we've been lucky enough to be in the middle of it. I'm incredibly privileged to be a full-time musician, and I don't forget that for a second. But perhaps we need to be better at arguing our case, but then also perhaps more people need to take on that argument so it doesn't feel every year we have to justify again and again, perhaps. Yeah.
On that point, if you looked at the news, you would think that the entire economy for Britain and for France depends on the fishing industry, right? It's tiny, it's nothing. The creative industries outstrip that by miles in terms of what it adds to the, not just GDP, but the other broader economic measures. The creative industries are bigger than the automotive industry in the UK, bigger than many of the manufacturing industries. And what sort of level of support do we get? Not very much. And I think that maybe there's one element of the fact that people who work in the creative industries are highly resourceful and resilient and are used to sort of pushing through difficulties and then being taken for granted by policymakers. And I think we need to do a lot better in terms of stating that case and being more vocal about it.
Can I say something? I think also we may be sometimes a bit, we're in an echo chamber because everybody in this room knows exactly how important music is, and it's so difficult to reach the people who don't know that. And that has to do with, it goes both ways, because if we could reach those people, we would also get more funding because it would be more popular. And in my microclimate in a national broadcasting corporation, we meet that every day. We cannot get them to understand how important music is when they can be showing chess. And chess, they've put amazing amounts of money in, so every single Norwegian knows how to play chess because that's what they decided to put their money into. So how can we get out of our echo chamber and reach other areas of society that will help us create more funding? And unfortunately, orchestral musicians are actually quite tired. We don't have any kind of power at all. It's always the people with the budgets that have the power. We just do what we're told, basically.
And of course, as a researcher, we are sort of also, we need to, we write our proposals, but we need the right external funders, and we need to match with what do you call it, listening announcement, and but we need a lot. When we have been talking about these longitudinal studies, we need epidemiological studies. We need to sort of studies that can also show the sort of public health benefits and causal mechanisms involved, because I think it's then even the sort of policymakers and economists will understand, that it has a major impact on longevity, on health, on well-being of potentially the population at large, But where to get from here to there? You will write a proposal soon. So, yeah.
Let's see. Changing a bit of focus, the topic now, and I want to show you something that came out a couple of weeks ago. Mariangela, who I've been honored to play with, Mariangela Vaccatello is a fantastic, phenomenal pianist. She won the second prize at the France Liszt International Piano Competition in 1999. She was only 17 when she came back to Milan. It was phenomenal. She won the first prize at the Ferruccio Busoni International Piano Competition in 2005, and actually also at Tromsø, the first prize at the Top of the World International Piano Competition in 2009. Now, perhaps I shouldn't translate this article that appeared in an Italian newspaper a couple of weeks ago, but actually I'm going to tell you. Porte chiuse disparità per le donne nella musica. Closed doors and inequality for women in music. In the articles, she also talked a lot about when she got the second prize at the France Liszt, and she said, I heard that day that I couldn't get the first prize because I was a young woman and I had all the time in my life to get the first prize later in my life. So, This is to say, from your point of view, how do you experience, or have you been experienced, gender dynamics?
There is a lot to say here. No, it's. First of all, I'd like to say that we live in the best country in the world for this. So there really is a lot of really good work on equality in this country. So, but when 30 years ago, when I was doing my first auditions, I have to do my 25. I was told, do not wear high heels, do not cough, do not breathe there, because all these things will show that you're a woman. Because of course there's a screen, so they don't know. So I had to do everything I could possibly do to make sure that the panel didn't know that I was a woman. And I was talking to some young female students a year ago, and they said exactly the same thing. We haven't gone on one bit, still 25 years later. And they are being told that they mustn't breathe in this place, because if they breathe there, they won't get the job. And it makes me so cross. But I try and think of it, because I know that all my colleagues, everybody I know in the business, is not in any way wanting to favoritize men. So what is it about this one breath that makes the girl not eligible for the job? Why is that so important? And I think much of it must come down to tradition. On my instrument, bass trombone, this is the way it's always been played. It's always been played like this. And if somebody comes along and makes a slightly different phrase, then that's not different, it's wrong. And that's a hard thing to change, because you can't change that until you get equality in the panels and the juries, and you get girls playing these phrases. But it's starting to change. But but at the same time as this, I just wanted to say, because I actually wrote down in my book when I came here, I wanted to say that in Norway I feel as though equality has gone so far that in some cases you're not allowed to talk about differences anymore. So how can we talk about the fact that women do have less lung capacity, or they have brain fog sometimes, or how can we talk about that without it becoming a weakness or a reason not to give you the job? That's not an answer, it's a question.
I think something I've thought a little bit about, which is slightly to one side of the topic here, is auditions and what's required. Auditions are about being perfect. And one thing I think I appreciate from music education is what it seems in Norway is that I feel like there's actually more focus on the musicality and we want to hear something that we love, whereas my understanding in some other countries is that there's a very prescribed way of playing something. If you don't do it that prescribed way, then that's it. I believe that people are trying here to allow a longer audition, more chance for people to show what they can do. But yeah, I've heard the same thing for auditions behind screens. Don't wear heels because they'll know you're a woman, for good or bad. But the implication is it's for bad. Yeah, it's a difficult subject because also we need equality on audition panels. We need, when you have a section where everyone is a man, then perhaps not just people want to employ what they know. If what they know is a man, then they will perhaps inadvertently or otherwise, I'm trying to be positive here about it, but the most positive way of viewing that situation. So I think also something I think about to do with how we frame, how we talk about younger colleagues or musicians in the business is I have heard in the past young male colleagues referred to as showing great potential and young female colleagues referred to as not having enough experience. And those are the same side, that's the same coin, it's just a different way of phrasing the... I should add that's a long time ago that I heard this, but I think it still occasionally plays out today. And I wonder why women are... women, it's also pure fact, it's probably more difficult for women to get experience in the business because perhaps we're less often hired in the freelance scene. It's hard to... Research needs to show, but anecdotally sometimes, I would add to what Claire said that I think we really do live in a country that's really trying to make a difference here. I've freelanced in the UK and things were different there. I do think in Norway people are trying to make this less of an issue, but there's always things that can be improved, I believe.
We do have a very gendered work life in Norway, so it's probably quite a way to go. I mean, a lot of Brits tend to think, or other people too, but I've been discussing it mostly with Brits that 90% of women are working, and 95% even, and even when they have children, but women are mostly working in municipal or governmental jobs, and 30% are in part-time positions. And the ones who tend to sort of stay home when the children are ill. And I mean, we do have an extremely gendered, surprisingly gendered work life. So it's, it's a lot of positive developments, but I can imagine that there's a long way to go and an important job to do.
I wonder if you have also like percentage that you need to achieve for women. For example, in Spain, when you have to decide on a job position and you build up a panel of evaluators, it has to be a parity in the members. So if you have 4 men, you need 4 women, full stop. So maybe having like a quote of a percentage of women that should be playing in an orchestra. I don't know if that applies also here in Norway, or how is it? How do you fill up the jobs in orchestra as to concerning the percentage of female and male? Because in some places there is this law that you should have equal numbers. I don't know.
Yeah, the problem with that is it doesn't really help to have lots of tutti second violin female players if your whole trombone section is men, and it can't be expected that violin players should judge an audition and tell people who the best bass trombone player is. It doesn't really work like that. You always have to, but yeah. Being aware is a good start. In my orchestra, as I say, there's 1 trombone, 1 trumpet, 2 horns that are women, so it is possible to make juries with expert brass playing opinions, but it's hard, yeah.
Just a couple of reflections from me. Which is also partly personal in the sense that my eldest daughter is also an aspiring musician, and we'll see. But it's also then, what type of professional life could she potentially end up with if she becomes a musician? That's something I'm thinking about every day, and particularly as we're doing these things. And will she be able to have a career throughout her whole life? And this is also something I think it's particularly important to also that men get interested in this topic, and because I think we, as if I should talk on behalf of several, that we have to be part of the solution to this as well. And I think there's a huge gender issue, not only in classical music, but in general in music. Popular music is the same, jazz. I mean, it's all over the place. As a music technologist, it's even worse because we are the worst of the worst, because we have kind of a doubling up with both kind of the tech style plus the kind of, so this gender imbalance on both combining, making it even worse. So this is something I've been thinking about a lot and working with. Then from a research perspective, so running a research center at the size of a symphony orchestra and kind of trying to put together a team of people, it's something I've been thinking a lot about. And in terms of also the importance of diversity in general for making a good team. And in research, and this is of course different than in music, but research is also very much about performing, right? I mean, it's getting the best articles out there, doing the best presentations and showing off in different ways, and that will also give you the job if you're able to kind of compete at the highest level. But there we have engaged in quite a lot of work recently where we have been trying to look at research assessment and broaden out, not only looking at the number of the highest kind of publications, but also think more about other qualities as well. And thinking that if you want to be a team member and be part of something bigger, then other things may also come into play. It may be that having the biggest lung capacity or doing this or that may not be the only thing that matters. It could be other things that are important too, particularly if you are building up a community of others and need to engage there. So, but to me, this boils down to leadership on one side and culture on the other, really. And if you don't have leaders that actually want to do this, it's not going to change, right? But then you also need a culture, because you also need a culture among the peers and those sitting on these committees, etc., that they actually come there. So it's an interesting and difficult problem, but we somehow need to tackle this. And I think at least in the world of classical music, I think conductors are key. We are still, I guess, far from having equality there or some balance. Of course, there is a genderedness also in terms of composers, and this has been discussed regularly as well. What kind of programming you're doing, and etc. etc. But I mean, I think we are not going to change anything if we're actually not doing anything radical here. I think, and it's some people may find that a bit provocative, but I think we actually need to have leaders that want to make a change, and then do it really. How to do that, I don't know. But we need to somehow be responsible. We need to select and find leaders, conductors, program in such a way that we can actually make a change. That's an opinion.
Opinions and attitudes. I mean, that's partly what we were talking about before. With these, attitudes and long-standing, ways of breathing or. But leadership is, of course, important. But you were talking quite a bit about, education, and to change attitudes. We need to, provide knowledge. And I mean, it takes a long time to educate a new generation. But I mean, when I was talking with these 7 guys, for example, I was presenting earlier today. I mean, they are answering very fast. As gender is not an issue. No. And it's sort of. You're answering so fast. I mean, you're not really doing an estimate of, going through sort of hormonal things, age gap, different types of music, context. No, it's an attitude. It's sort of an opinion coming right out in seconds. Like people are answering how satisfied are you with your life overall. People are not really making a sort of thorough evaluation. So it's something about. I mean. I'm sure these guys, if you had sort of a a lecture or 10 of them. I mean, it's quite a lot of interesting findings. We have been going through today too, you know. And I mean, it's a really important world to know more about. And, you know, knowledge changes over time, attitudes and culture. So I think that's really important to build this into our educational system, yeah.
I just want to say that those 7 guys, they do have a female colleague, but she isn't allowed in that group.
Exactly, yeah.
So, well, maybe she's allowed, but she isn't in it. No. One thing that also I react to is the amount of photographs like you showed, which is just men, and the men often don't see. They say, "Oh, look, there's a great picture of all these brass players," and they don't actually see that it's all men. And it's not. They don't mean to be. What's the word? Divisive, or they don't mean anything. They just don't. You know, they don't see it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I also want to add that I have amazing colleagues, and there is absolutely no problem with any gender between us. So it is possible today. It's
absolutely.
not. Yeah.
But
so,
I mean,
the solution isn't necessarily to have everything 50-50. The solution is to have the best players, both socially and playing wise.
I would also just add that what's really heartening in Norway is to see how many women or young girls are taking up instruments in the brass and woodwinds. Especially, I do a lot of teaching in corps, and then there are boys and girls playing all the instruments. It's fantastic. So we need to keep that going, and also encourage kids to keep playing when they get older, and not disappear from the system, and hopefully never disappear from the system. I was just about to speak Norwegian because of something to do with not feeling included or something like that. But again, I do feel like Norway is in a good situation there, which they can definitely build on.
Maybe it's also finding a balance between competitive environment and collective environments. Because when we look at sports, females don't compete with males in sports. They have competitions for females, right? And competitions for males due to biological differences. And in the orchestra, you need to compete with the men because you're going to competitive work, but also you are going to a collective working environment. So maybe finding a balance between those two components of being competitive, but then maybe females cannot compete with lung volume, but they can compete with other things that are really important for collective environments and working together, because at the end is making music together in an orchestra, not the best solo player in the brass section.
What constitutes the best solo? I mean, people have different markers as to what. It's not just the loudest or the quietest or there's many differences. So I think we all have valuable things to take to the collective organisation. So, yeah.
It's very inspiring to see progress within the brass section. I would really, really love to see same progress for the conductors. 2011, after 240 years of activities of Teatro alla Scala, that was the year for the first woman conductor to lead a production at Teatro alla Scala, 2011. So, hopefully, in other countries and in other areas and conductors, perhaps we can try to see same progress. I want to shift now the focus on, I want to show you something and talk about the secret formula of well-being for women performers. So let's try to dig on that. Anna-Sophie Mutter. What is your secret formula, Mrs. Mutter? My formula is this. Love what you do. Take care of your body, nurture your mind, and never lose your sense of wonder. And above all, stay connected to music, to others, and to yourself. So this is the secret formula of the world-renowned violinist Anna-Sophie Mutter. And I wonder, what would you be your secret formula, and what research says about that?
I did actually write down something for this. But first, I would say something that Ragnhild said earlier about resilience. When you make an oboe reed, we have this cane that we use, and often the cane, you can get a piece of cane that's got these small brown dots on it, and often people will throw that piece of cane out, and those brown dots mean that in the cane field it's been hitting other pieces of cane in the wind, so it's been knocked on the sides. Those pieces of cane are often very strong and very flexible because they've had a bit of knocking around. And I would say definitely part of my recipe for well-being is not too much stress, obviously, but a degree of meeting small barriers that can be overcome, but trying to I'm not wording this very eloquently, but being able to take these small knocks to be stronger for the main thing. As far as playing the oboe goes, it can all very often come crashing down very quickly. It's an instrument where anything that could go wrong can do, and having the ability to move straight on from something that doesn't go your way is something that I've discovered is essential to my mental health as a musician, and also that also means that if you're able to move on, then you're not being stuck in that your entire sense of self-worth depends on that note that just didn't come out just now. Being able to move on. I like to think of my well-being as it's not a super pretty picture, but as each performance is like a brick in a really beautiful castle. So every time you do your performance, you're building this beautiful creation. So it's not going to fall down if one brick doesn't work or something goes wrong. And that's taken me many years to get to that point. So I think that could be something that can help other people to think about, perhaps. But
yeah, agree. And I also wrote something down. For me, it's extremely important to surround myself with people who know what my job is, and whether it's friends and family or whether it's people who I'm lucky enough to have the money to be able to pay, either whether it's a psychologist or somebody who can give me lots of hormones, or it's so important, work-life balance, and take compliments. Remember the compliments, because that's a really, really hard thing to do. Isn't it saying that you have to be given a compliment 10 times to remember it? But write your compliments down and give compliments to other people. Mm.
You want to add something?
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about anything, but I was looking at your citation behind there, and it's quite, it's quite 5 ways type. Be present, be active, take notice, learn. So I think that's I mean, there's a lot of recipes for well-being, and I mean, we differ. I mean, I've been doing quite a lot of genetically informative research, and it certainly doesn't show that well-being or happiness or is sort of determined by genetics. I mean, all of evolutionary history is about, you know, changing and developing. So it's a lot of different cures or definitions, or but certainly, I mean, I think there was a good overlap between the 5 ways and the citation in a way. So I think if I should choose one recipe, that would be activity-based, and also maybe the 5 ways actually. But I mean, it's a lot that it doesn't capture in the world of well-being.
Just to make a very big leap, but then to loop back again through that, AI. Everybody's talking about AI these days, and technologies and computers and things. And I teach sound programming, and I'm involved in a lot of doing AI things these days. And the interesting thing is that when people say that AI is going to take over the world and these things, then I always try to remind people that we are bodies, living bodies. We are breathing. We have our embodied cognition. We are not like computers. And I think this is very important to remind ourselves about. And this morning I was teaching my students, and I taught them the basics of electroacoustics. So I had them take a speaker element and a small battery and connect them together. And then when you connect them, you feel that the speaker is actually moving. So it's the physicality of sound, really. And they all get amazed. Oh, wow, this is electric sound in a way. Now, the thinking about now, I'm helping out running the Marienlyst Skolekorps is just over here in the school here, and I was preparing instruments the other day for the new aspiranter, the new kids coming in. They're going to get the instruments this week, and I was playing through all the trombones and cornets and everything that we had there to give it to them. And then I know that giving it to them, and these young kids, they pick up that instrument, and the first time they blow into whatever instrument they're getting, and they get sounds, and it's magical to them, right? The feeling that you have the resonances in, and you can feel it in your body, etc. And I think it's extremely important these days when we do have all these technologies around, AI is taking over, and blah blah blah. Still, the power of music, both for people performing themselves in terms of actually feeling the sound in literally in their bodies, if they sing, or in kind of in the instrument if it's resonating. But also the fact that you're going to a performance and you're seeing a live human being standing there with a body breathing, etc., and you're making actually a physical sound that hits you, it's quite magical, right? And this is something I think we need to remind ourselves about. The power of music really is this embodiment. And this is something that I think all of us that are playing an instrument really feel. And I think this is also something why people also bother going to concerts at all and spend money and time and seeing live people standing there doing instead of just listening it to on their mobile phone. It's exactly about that. And this is something I think we need to, well, everyone sitting here I guess agree about this, but this is something we need to kind of tell and explain to the world. And this is also what we, through our research, we also try to show this. We do empirical research showing what's actually happening here in the bodies, in the minds, etc. So yes, more research is the answer, of course. But also telling about it, I think, is important to show the benefits of this to everyone involved as well.
So the discussions today covered a number of topics from depression, anxiety, musculoskeletal issues, menopause effect, positive, negative. Music as powerful tool for society and for health. Now, I would love to conclude the session with reflections about future generations. Suggestion for future you, suggestion for young musicians. From your perspective as orchestra players, as musicians, professional musicians, and also what research is telling us, what should be suggestion for.
I might have to refer to my book again here. I think younger me, I'm quite happy to be relatively candid about the things that the health issues I've had to do with playing. I had depression. I've had problems with my arms, muscles, shoulder. I'm currently on steroid treatment for shoulder injury. I've also had a lot of trouble with women's health issues. Although I counted up, I only missed 3 half days of work from all of it in 16 and a half years in my current job. So, so women definitely are good at getting on with it in the face of, quite a lot of discomfort. I think a lot of the time I wish I'd spoken to other people about these things, health professionals, much earlier. So I would definitely recommend to younger me that I got a second opinion about some things much earlier. I think there's very few professions in the world where your mental health and your physical health are so tightly connected to your ability to do your job. It's us and professional sportsmen, I think, are really at the top of it. I think the stigma of dealing with mental health issues, especially as a student, is tough. So I would encourage any method to get out there and talk to people and find someone outside of your group of friends or organisations so you can talk openly and freely with somebody who you trust and will it's so delicate when you're a student. You don't want to admit to a single infallibility because you don't want that to impact your career. And again, I'm so lucky to have a permanent job in the orchestra. I understand how it is to freelance, and I know that these issues are tenfold for freelancers. And also I would, again, I wish I discovered earlier that there are other things to life, and actually picking up other small joys and other things in your everyday actually makes you better at the thing that you do. So actually that would be the biggest takeaway, is just find joy in other things. If you're having a bad day with the oboe, then put it down and find something else. Just for the day, I mean, a small distraction is worth everything, I think. So I love what I do. I'm so grateful to do what I do, and but definitely finding a balance makes you better at it, I think. So.
Yeah, I've written down some really quick notes so I can do it quickly. Find the work-life balance, really important. Leave your instrument at work, don't take it home. Learn about cycluses and know what to expect. Know that if you're having a baby, which I haven't, that your muscles can split apart and you won't be able to play the horn afterwards. Somebody has to help you with that. Get help for your issues and not somebody else's issues. There's so many YouTube videos about how to breathe or how to do this, and they're not necessarily talking to you. Work out how to write an application, get funding, so that you yourself can find out what's good for you for this. And I just want to quote my granddad at the end, because it was a long time ago now, but I had said something to him like, "Oh, I wish it was tomorrow already," and he said, "Don't wish your life away." And I must say, my years as freelancer were absolutely amazing, and I wish I'd enjoyed them even more, than I did. If I'd known I would get a permanent position in the end, then I would have enjoyed a lot more the years before it. So don't wish your life away.
Do we have any reflections from research?
Just one thing that I would like to emphasize is music and the arts as a vehicle for connecting with other people. That's one of the 5 ways to well-being, of course, but by making music with people, you can engage, you can share ideas, you can experience joy and happiness. By going with others to see other people make music, you can have the same sort of experiences. So I think having that perspective is good for aspiring young professional musicians by thinking about their impact on society and knowing that what they're doing is feeding into this bigger push that can actually help society more. That was important through the pandemic. The only troubling thing I saw, and then we did some surveys with tens of thousands of people in the UK about their engagement with the arts during the pandemic. There was more technological interface. But then we asked, well, would you be willing to spend more money perhaps on this after the pandemic? And the answer was no. So we just need to look at how to emphasize that message of how music and the arts brings people together, and it's a very good mechanism, a vehicle to enhance well-being in one's life. And it's important for, I think, aspiring musicians to bear that in mind as they're looking to get onto some of the world's great stages.
And to a singer in particular, I would say not be afraid to say no to too much early and to too much. So have time to develop yourself, not wanting to be there already when you are not there yet.
Thank you all. It has been a great pleasure to learn more about your research and your lived experiences. I think we learn a lot, and we acknowledge that there are things that can be better, but perhaps we have already some ideas to focus upon and try to foster well-being and mental health. So thank you to our panel members. Thank you to all of you on site, and thank you for all of you everywhere you are. Thank you.